Hey guys, tonight we're trudging through powder white silence toward a lonely monastery carved into the belly of a glacier. You can almost hear your boots crunch over centuries of compacted snow, every sound wrapped in thick, cold quiet. There's no Wi-Fi here, no neon, no caffeine, just a handful of monks who, against all odds, will end up inventing something that halfway resembles sunglasses. You probably won't survive this level of brightness. Your eyes would quit after a week, maybe sooner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand before the monastery gate as the wind rattles wooden beams baked silver by centuries of frost. The snow sparkles like a sea of salt in weak winter sun, vivid enough to make you squint. Your breath clouds into ghostly ribbons as somebody on the wall calls a greeting. Not loud, just enough to echo once. The door creaks open, revealing warmth that smells faintly of beeswax, old cheese, and damp wool habits drying by a hearth. The monks welcome you without surprise. Travelers appear rarely, but they always do. Inside, you see bare walls pierced with arrow-slit windows, a single crucifix polished smooth by candlelight, and a tabby cat asleep on a worn psalter. The air hums softly with the rhythm of life sustained at altitude. Beyond formal greetings, one thing stands out. Nearly all the brothers carry a permanent squint. Their faces are weather-etched, their brows drawn low against the sun's endless reflection off snow. The abbot jokes, his tone as dry as smoked peat, that they've spent too much time trying to contemplate divine radiance, without eye protection. It gets a chuckle, though their smiles are squiggly and half-blind. This monastery, historians think, clings somewhere in the 13th century Alps, though the exact location is debated. Historians still argue whether it stood above the Rarni icefield or farther east along the Tyrolean rim. You don't need a pin on a map. What matters is that these monks live inside a bowl of brilliance. The sun bounces endlessly between snowcaps, illuminating their refectory tables more fiercely than any candle could. Their vows bind them to simplicity, but simplicity doesn't mean comfort. Every morning they shovel paths between dormitory and chapel, their eyes burning white after just a few minutes outdoors. At first they shrug, affliction builds humility after all, but the glare becomes relentless. You trail after one brother, Brother Cillian, tasked with collecting firewood. He guides his mule with quiet whistles, and you notice tiny ice halos floating in the air. Midway down the path, he stops, wincing. The light feels sharper than a blade. Half an hour later, he struggles to keep his eyes open. Snow blindness, the later world will call it. Right now, they just call it divine punishment or, slightly kender, winter's lesson. Back inside, he covers his eyes with a damp cloth soaked in melted snow. You catch the faint hiss as warmth meets coolness. Around him, others mutter small prayers. Snow blindness is temporary, but humiliation lasts. It's hard to chant the psalms when your eyelids flutter in agony. The abbot allows Brother Cillian to rest, though he reminds everyone that comfort mustn't drift into luxury. This dichotomy, between asceticism and invention, will spiral into their unplanned experiment. That evening, while the brothers share a supper of pea stew, beeswax candles throw honey-colored light onto long trestle tables. Conversation is minimal, but you sense minds whirring beneath the silence. The problem is simple: they cannot read in daylight without aching eyes. They cannot read at night because lamp oil is scarce. Something must give. One monk, Florian, remembers travelers mentioning the Esmai up north scraping slits into wood or bone to narrow vision against glare. The rumor sounds halfway mythical, like a reindeer god's eye mask. Still, necessity breeds curiosity. Later, you follow them to the small workshop behind the refectory. It smells of pine wool fiber and faint charcoal smoke. Here they carve, tinker, repair the sacred vessels, and soon dabble in something wonderfully unorthodox. A single window faces west, flooding the room with late sun reflected off snowfields. It's blinding enough to bleach prayer books left too close to the sill. The monks line pebbles on the bench, quartz, obsidian, even shards of dark glass salvaged from broken lamps. You can tell they don't know what they're doing, but the hush of trying is almost holy. The dullest bits of glass appeal most. They seem to eat light, not scatter it. Outside, the wind drops, flakes drift like ash. Brother Cillian, eyes still sore, chuckles that maybe God made snow to test humanity's recipe for squinting. Laughter here comes sparingly, shared like bread. They take it as fuel. Above their murmurs, you glimpse halos of candle fumes rising toward the timber beams. The faint tang of soot and oil permeates everything. It's irony itself. The very stuff that stings their eyes is also what will help them solve it. That night, the bells toll compline. Shadows stretch along frosted walls while stars blink like cold embers. You drift to sleep in a borrowed cell, rough blankets scratching at your chin, a window shutter breathing in rhythm with the wind. Somewhere nearby, a monk hums an old Latin refrain that translates roughly to, "Light within light, do not blind us." When dawn returns, milky and sharp, The snow outside glows enough to make you lift an arm across your face. Through the half-open door, you glimpse Brother Florian holding up a scrap of darkened quartz, peering through it as if searching for forgiveness. The experiment begins in the simplest way possible. Curiosity meets too much light. Already, tiny shifts ripple. The scribes pause less to rub their eyes. The abbot frowns but doesn't forbid. The idea that comfort might coexist with virtue starts seeding quietly, like moss beneath melting snow. The monastery, once defined by austerity, begins to hum with low-key experimentation. You can feel it, gentle rebellion disguised as practicality. And in that hum lies the first shimmer of what, centuries later, will darken fashionable noses in Paris cafes and Malibu beaches alike. For now, it's only you, a hall of squinting monks, and the faint hope that darkness may finally bring relief. Morning arrives like an avalanche of silver light pouring through the narrow, arched windows. You wake before the bells, blinking against a sky that glows pale as burnished tin. Outside, the snow stretches unbroken to the horizon, so bright it seems to hum. The monks, already awake, move like shadows in the kitchen, their sandals whispering across the flagstones. One of them offers you a mug of thick barley tea that smells faintly like hay and metal. It steams in your hands, warmth pulsing into your fingers. And as you sip, you notice again how each face in that room carries the faint redness of half-healed snowburn around the eyes. By now, Brother Cillian's squint has turned into a running joke. Someone teases him, gentle as snow falling off a branch, that he'll soon need divine permission just to glance toward heaven. The laughter evaporates quickly, replaced by another moment of silence, because behind the humor sits fatigue. They've learned that devotion is one thing, but daily physical blindness is another. As you follow them outside, the glare hits like an invisible curtain. Every direction gleams. It's not the sun itself, he's nowhere to be seen. It's the snow, each flake a mirror bouncing light until your vision feels washed clean out. Even with your sleeve shielding your face, it hurts. You quickly realize how these men, who pray in this glare every day, might slowly lose sight not to age but to purity itself. They tell you this isn't new. Every winter, a handful of brothers go half-blind for weeks. Some compare it to penance, others suspect it's an ailment. One ancient manuscript you glimpse later calls it the shining affliction, as if created by God just to test humility. A charming thought, until you can't find the latrine without bumping into frozen firewood. And so begins the monastery's quiet crisis. The brothers need sunlight to tend bees, to read from their psalters, and to haul water down the slope when snow crusts too hard for digging. But too much sunlight steals their sight. You can tell by the small gestures, eyes constantly watering, heads bent toward shadow, that prayer alone isn't enough this time. Brother Florian, ever the thinker, starts keeping notes on a wax tablet how long he can stand outdoors before his vision whites out, which hours of the day glow most painfully, even when the clouds help. His entries read like a scientist's journal minus the terminology. He's quantifying discomfort. Historians still argue whether he can be considered the first documented observer of photokeratitis or just a fussy monk scribbling excuses to skip snow duty. During midday chores, you help haul blocks of ice from the stream to melt for water. The surface shines like polished armor. You notice tiny crescents carved into some monks' hoods, slits barely wide enough for vision. They look oddly modern, almost like ski masks. Brother Cillian explains the idea came from northern hunters who pass by once a year, telling stories of bone goggles that shield eyes from Arctic glare. You imagine these travelers wrapped in furs, eyes reduced to thin dark lines, carrying fish oil and rumors. The image lingers, snow and soot and shared survival. Inside, the monks mimic what they heard. They cut wooden masks, narrowing gaps until just enough light seeps through. One brother, Brother Anselm, scores the wood deeper, joking he might carve a fashion statement. Then he sneezes violently as sawdust flies everywhere. A few chuckles echo off the stone walls. It's not exactly kosher, but the thought delights them. That evening, by the fire, you listen as the abbot reads from a worn volume on early church hermits living in desert glare. He pauses often to reflect that too much light can be as dangerous as darkness, both can blind. The monks nod, reflection here is literal and spiritual all at once. Later, after compline, you walk out beneath a dripping roofline. Moonlight bounces off the drifts like liquid silver, dazzling still. No color, no shadows, just an ocean of bright silence. The cold nips your ears, and you feel, perhaps as they do, that sight itself can become a temptation, an overload of seeing. One by one, you notice small experiments taking root. A monk polishes a piece of smoky quartz, muttering that it eats the sun. Another stains a thin layer of linen with lamp soot, draping it over his face while reading. They don't yet call these inventions. Innovation sounds boastful. Instead, they treat it as humility, borrowing darkness. The mornings that follow bring cautious optimism. Fewer brothers stumble into tables. The abbot, skeptical but amused, admits that productive scribes do glorify the Lord. Secretly, you suspect he's just happy fewer errors appear in copied manuscripts. Holy typos cause headaches for everybody. By week's end, a visiting shepherd climbs up from the valley, bringing cheese and a question. He's never seen monks with blackened veils over their eyes. When told it's to block the light, he looks confused. But it's winter, he says. Why fight the sun? We hardly get enough. You can't blame him. Lower valleys live in gray fog while the monastery bathes in perpetual reflection. From a distance, truth reverses itself. That night, as flakes drift lazily against the shutter, Brother Florian scribbles one last note. The eyes are poor monks, seeking shade where none exists. He blows out the candle, the smoke curling like a thought only half spoken. You stretch out on your straw mattress, feeling warmth fade from the room, and realize their world's problem isn't darkness, it's brilliance taken too far. Sleep takes you slowly as the wind hums against old timber, and somewhere in the courtyard, a bell chimes once, a sigh of brass across miles of ice. Tomorrow, they'll start darkening glass fragments purely to see what happens. Their invention hums faintly in the future, waiting. Dawn slides in like melted pearl over stone, blurring the horizon between sky and snow until you can't tell which is which. The monastery bells ring prime, their tone softer than you'd expect. Wrong for battle, right for bread making. You step outside into a light so white it feels warm on your teeth. The brothers line up for their morning duties, pale faces wrapped in thin wool bands that barely keep the sting away. It's been a week since they started carving those slit-eyed wooden face coverings, and they're already trading design tips like medieval engineers. You watch as Brother Anselm ties his mask with rough hemp cord. It's not elegant, more like a horse blinkered against temptation, but it works. He tests it, facing the snowfield, his shoulders relax. When he takes it off, the outline of the slits leaves little stripes of unburned skin, a tan pattern years ahead of its time. You join a work crew heading to the nearby slope to collect frozen herbs. The trail winds between basalt cliffs crusted with rime. Every step crunches rhythmically, like soft percussion accompanying a monastic chant. Far below, clouds boil lazily, the world reduced to whiteness and stone. You can't help feeling you're walking on the ceiling of the earth. At the ridge, Brother Florian pauses to poke his staff through loose drift. We used to come here for reflection, he says, deadpan. No, we come for less of it? It earns rare laughter. Humor here is measured in molehill doses, strong enough to thaw a moment's frost, never enough to draw reprimand from the abbot. Back in the courtyard, the experiments expand. They've moved from simple masks to darker materials, thin slate shards held up to the light, arches of obsidian scavenged from old reliquaries. You help grind a piece of quartz against the stone floor, the rasp like surf receding. Powder dusts your gloves as you realize they're inventing optics through hunch and prayer, not equations. Historians still argue whether the monastery's notes predate Venetian glass innovations or just happened coincidentally in the same century. Either way, the air here vibrates with gentle curiosity. Inside the workshop, Brother Cillian dabs soot onto two circular bits of transparent resin used for sealing jars. He spreads it thin with a goose feather, creating a smoky hue. When he holds one to his eye, the world dims instantly. He blinks, smiling, the first real relief he's felt all season. Then he promptly bumps into a chair, proving that progress never comes without collateral furniture damage. The abbot watches all this in silence at first, hands tucked in sleeves. Eventually he sighs. If creation began with light, perhaps salvation arrives through shade. It sounds more like resignation than theology. The decision stands: the brothers may continue tinkering, so long as the work remains a means to contemplation, not vanity. That's monk speak for, don't let it turn into a business. Records suggest this same winter birthed an unusual manuscript full of half-sketched diagrams, crossed circles labeled in Latin shorthand, traces of candle soot smudged along the margins. Historians later called it Liber Obscura, though nobody's certain that was the title. Some pages describe stones that dim yet clarify, while others instruct on how to grind crystal without fracturing the faith. It's delicate poetry disguised as workshop notes. Midday warmth softens the snow enough for dripping to begin. A sound like applause muffled by cotton. You and Brother Florian sit near the refectory wall eating crusts spread with fermented honey. He muses that human eyes weren't designed for eternal white, and perhaps there's heresy in creating a world where color vanishes. Then he squints directly at the sunlight bouncing off his spoon and mutters. Yet here we are, attempting to survive God's most relentless wallpaper. Afternoons stretch long up here. They divide time by shadows cast from the sundial carved into the courtyard slab, a sundial mostly invisible under snow. Guesswork rules. Someone always forgets when Vespers begins, which leads to forgiving smiles and the occasional sprinting monk in a wool habit. The haze of brilliance blurs even their schedules. By early evening, a change. Brother Anselm discovers that layering soot on both sides of a thin shard makes the light gentler, not darker. It scatters brightness, producing softness like twilight even at noon. He describes it as practical mercy. The phrase sticks. You wander the halls, noticing how small adjustments ripple through daily life. Fewer headaches, longer copying hours. hymns sung with less wincing. The abbot's worry lessens enough that supper portions grow marginally larger, a local miracle akin to transubstantiation of porridge into soup. Snow still falls relentlessly at night. You stand by the narrow window of your cell, tracing frost feathers growing upward on the glass. Beyond them, stars blink like bits of quartz scattered by careless angels. Somewhere next door, Brother Cillian coughs, muttering something about needing to invent heated mittens next. Progress never rests, even under vows of silence. Before sleep, you picture the monk's new inventions stacked carefully on a table, wooden masks, smoked glass, bits of obsidian given humble purpose. Tools of modesty rather than pride. They don't yet know that centuries later, entire industries will profit from what they now call ocular humility. For tonight, it's only an act of survival in dazzling quiet. You close your eyes, but the whiteness behind your lids still flickers, an afterimage of too much purity. Darkness feels earned. As your breathing slows, wind sweeps the eaves again, scattering snow across the roof tiles like a sigh of relief. The next morning, the monastery smells faintly of melted tallow and singed cloth. Someone has spent half the night experimenting again. You follow the scent to the scriptorium, where smoke curls lazily against the rafters, the sunlight slicing through it like pale honey ribbons. Brother Anselm sits cross-legged at a table, hands blackened from soot, a grin stretching across his face. On the bench before him lie a dozen half-darkened panes of mica, each reflecting your shape like muddy mirrors. "Success," he whispers proudly. Then with perfect timing, one pane slips, cracks, and the grin turns philosophical. "Mostly success," he corrects. The daily rhythm here has adjusted to these nocturnal initiatives. Some monks rise earlier, while others sneak into workshops after compline, claiming insomnia and divine restlessness. The abbot pretends not to notice. You sense he secretly enjoys the quiet industry. It keeps minds busy, keeps complaints buried beneath sawdust. Outside, the mountains glow, crisp and merciless. The glare bounces off the snowfields, so intense that even the crows have taken to flying with their eyes nearly closed. You step into that brilliance with Brother Florian, who tests his newest contraption, two thin slivers of slate bound with a leather strap. From a distance, he looks absurdly modern, like a reluctant fashion model trudging across eternity. When he lifts the lenses to his face, his posture changes. Less tension, more ease. You walk with him to the stream, half frozen but still gleaming. He murmurs about how the light curves here, bending on the ice like music. "Maybe everything visible is just misplaced sound," he says. You chuckle, though part of you thinks he's serious. He catches your twitch of amusement. "Laugh now." He sighs, but someday someone will make a living off that thought. He isn't wrong. Centuries later, physicists will. Back at the monastery, the cleaners sweep drifts and shovel paths. One young servant boy wears a soot-lined scrap of cloth across his eyes, claiming he's seeing like the learned brothers. The phrase spreads, and within a week half the novices are copying it, though few understand why. Imitation always outpaces explanation. Historians still argue whether this early popularity proves that style, not science, made the invention inevitable. Inside the refectory, the low hum of daily chores fills the air. The monks scrub rough wooden bowls, beeswax glinting on every surface. You watch them move slow, deliberate, practical harmony with small imperfections that feel human. When the abbot blesses their meal of pottage, his emphasis on the gift of sight draws a few sidelong smirks. He knows what he's doing. Afternoon shifts toward violet haze as clouds roll in. Sun catches in those floating flakes like amber dust. The world finally softens, shadows returning shyly to the landscape. You feel relief similar to what the monks must feel each time twilight delivers reprieve. For hours, they needn't protect their eyes, they simply exist without squinting. You explore the cloister corridor, reading faint graffiti carved centuries before, small doodles of chalices, fish, and one lonely inscription that reads, "Lux et umbra? Amica, light and shadow, friends." It's the monastery's working motto now, even if unofficial. Later that night, snow creaks off the roof in heavy slabs. Somewhere in the courtyard, a goat bleats, startled by ice falling nearby. You peek through the window. The goat isn't alone. A shepherd has arrived, wrapped in a fraying cloak, holding a bundle under his arm. Inside that bundle glimmers something unexpected, 2 lumps of amber glass. He explains in a low voice to Brother Cillian that traders from Venice brought these pieces as waste. Spoiled attempts from colored glass production. The monks examine them curiously. The glass holds a smoky gold tint that darkens the light just enough. It's smoother than quartz, less brittle than mica. Suddenly, soot and slate seem amateur. The monks murmur thanks while slipping a little extra cheese into the shepherd's satchel. Barter completed, history quietly pivots. Working overnight, they shave, polish, and sand the glass pieces flat. No thicker than a saint's patience, Florian jokes. By dawn, he holds them to the window. The glow that passes through is rich and calm, soft like candlelight even under a hard sun. He blinks, eyes steady. "It works," he whispers. You can almost hear generations sigh in advance. Still, pride is dangerous here. The abbot insists each pair must remain a communal tool, not a personal possession. They hang the tinted lenses from the workshop wall beside the chisels and tongs. A subtle statement invention must serve the group, not the ego. Yet you can see in every sidelong glance the small rebellion of satisfaction. That evening, during readings, Brother Cillian mispronounces a line and claims the darkness from his new lenses confused him. The laughter rolls through the hall like warm broth on a cold throat. You're struck by how lighthearted a place devoted to severity can become once people begin to see clearly again. As night deepens, the monks sit around the hearth exchanging theories about color and salvation. One suggests that heaven must be tinted gold like their glass, eternal afternoon without glare. Another argues that paradise would be pure darkness, relief from constant vision. Historians still argue whether that last statement was heretical or just poetic. You drift to your cell after midnight, the wind tickling the shutters. Sleep comes slower than usual. The glow of the snow outside presses through tiny cracks, casting pale geometric reflections across the stone floor. Through those golden shards of glass on the workbench, even moonlight looks kind, subdued, like the night itself wearing tinted glasses. Maybe, you think as your eyes close, invention is just humility practiced long enough to become clever. You wake to what seems, at first, to be the return of the sun itself. But it's only the stone courtyard flashing with reflected snow. Morning light here doesn't arrive, it attacks. The monks' new lenses have had a week of success, and you can tell from the relaxed shoulders and fewer grimaces that life feels easier. Still, every innovation invites its next dilemma. The abbot now struggles with a theological question: if darkness protects the soul's vessel, does that make invention a duty or a distraction? The debate unfolds wordlessly in the hallways, with nods and coughs substituting for open argument. You trail behind the group as they carry firewood, and catch Brother Florian saying under his breath, "We're months, not months. Why rush toward every flame?" The abbot hears but pretends not to. That's how most monastic disputes end. Not with punishment, but with an extra chore and silence. After breakfast, the brothers file into the cloister garden. Garden? Here is a generous term. It's little more than a courtyard-sized snowpatch dotted with frozen herbs and a reluctant pear tree bent by wind. They stand in the glare, testing their new tinted glass pieces. It's strange, seeing them like that, an order known for vows of humility now looking mildly like celestial alchemists. The air smells of incense and cold iron. Someone jokingly calls the display the miracle of dim vision. The mountain peaks reflect the late morning blaze into every valley. Your eyes sting even through the dark glass you borrow for a moment, and then comes what the brothers start calling simply the glow. When the sun reaches its highest angle, the slopes turn almost metallic. White banks flickering blue and silver, clouds hanging beneath your feet like mirrored oceans. Even the monastery walls gleam as if carved from pearl. You stand in this suspended glare, feeling the air vibrate softly. Brother Anselm points toward the horizon. The glaciers seem to pulse with color, faint pastel peaches and pinks shimmering at the edges. The mountain teaches patience, he murmurs, and a good pair of eyes. You silently agree, without protection, this much beauty borders on pain. Historians still argue whether such atmospheric shimmer genuinely influenced the monks' next big adjustment, or if this claim was embroidered later by romantic chroniclers. Either way, the outcome matters more than the motive. The brothers decide their lenses aren't just for safety. They can reveal subtler hues of light, turning snow into a painting. It's their one indulgence, an aesthetic awakening couched in practicality. Later that afternoon, you watch them in their scriptorium. The filtered glow enters through tall windows muted and golden now. Illuminated manuscripts almost seem to light themselves, the blues reacher, the reds somehow velvet. One younger monk grins with plain amazement and whispers. Each page glows like grace. For a moment, the world outside fades into quiet artistry. The abbot eventually catches the change and doesn't know what to do with it. His hesitation becomes the monastery's new tradition, quietly tolerating things whose outcomes remain uncertain. He blesses the brothers with a sigh and instructs them to keep recording what they see. That night, as supper bowls scrape empty, you sit near the iron brazier where the glow of coals replaces daylight. Reheated stones hiss as melted snow drips onto them, filling the room with a scent like baked clay and candle smoke. Brother Cillian leans near you, eyes squinting against flickering embers. "When I close my eyes," he admits, "I still see white." You nod. Everyone here knows that ghost image, the phantom brightness haunting eyelids long after dusk. He adds, half yawning, "If we could bottle night, we'd be rich." The joke earns tired laughter. After compline, you follow the faint chants fading down the corridor, steps echoing among columns frosted pale by candle grease. In the dormitory, rows of straw mattresses form perfect geometry, each humped beneath a wool blanket identical to the next. The air tastes faintly of smoke and quiet dreams. You slip beneath your own blanket and watch snow sift through cracks in the roof, just a few wayward flakes settling on the floor before melting into cold droplets. They glitter almost defiantly in the moonlight. You think of the strange paradox running through these walls, men dedicated to light learning to love shadow. If there's a moral, it's one so gentle it doesn't demand to be heard. Sometimes the surest faith hides behind tinted glass. Outside, the wind rises again, slow and rhythmic, brushing the shutters as if in benediction. The sound blurs with your slow heartbeat. Somewhere nearby, someone's voice hums the same line of plain chant that's drifted through centuries, simple, steady, stubbornly beautiful. The mountains may remain deaf to all this devotion, but tonight their glow feels softer, as though returning the favor. By now, the monastery has settled into a new kind of normal, one where soot-streaked fingers and darkened glass feel as natural as rosary beads. But the story of these makeshift sunglasses doesn't stay trapped inside stone walls forever. News, like thaw, seeps in from the edges. It begins with a visitor who climbs up the mountain path on a day so bright you can barely see his outline against the snow. His fur hood bristles with frost, and his boots look more like stitched-together animals than footwear. When he steps into the courtyard, the brothers blink in surprise. This man is not from the valley. His clothes, layered with reindeer hide, sealskin, and something that smells faintly of the sea, speak of somewhere far colder and far older in its relationship with snow. You watch as he pulls down a curious device from his forehead. 2 carved bone pieces joined with a cord, each slit as narrow as a quill. His eyes behind them are calm, unbothered by the glare that torments everyone else here. The monks exchange glances that say everything: curiosity, suspicion, a faint touch of envy. Brother Florian steps forward, palms open. Hospitality first, questions later. Over a bowl of steaming barley stew, the stranger explains in halting phrases and gestures that he has traveled south with traders, following the string of markets that stitch the continent together. Somewhere between fish, furs, and salt, he has ended up in a monastery perched above the clouds. Communication isn't smooth. Half the conversation happens through pointing and miming. But one thing comes across clearly: where he comes from, people have been dealing with snow blindness for a very long time. He demonstrates, slipping the bone goggles over his eyes, then pulling a handkerchief from a pouch and sprinkling fine black powder over the front. The monks lean into them. This is sorcery upside down, using darkness to gain clarity. Brother Cillian, unable to restrain himself, blurts, "You mean you wear those on purpose?" The translation takes a moment, but when the traveler understands, he laughs. Not a polite chuckle, a full belly laugh that echoes off stone. Snow blindness in his homeland is so obvious a hazard that the idea of not protecting one's eyes seems ridiculous. Up here, the monks are just catching up. Historians still argue whether this visitor came from a Sazmai community, a Greenlandic trading party, or another Arctic culture entirely. Surviving accounts are vague, and later copyists had a habit of folding all northern peoples into one snow-covered stereotype. Whatever his origin, his gear carries centuries of trial and error in its design. Those bone goggles, with their knife-thin slits, cut down the flood of light while preserving just enough vision to hunt, travel, and joke about southerners. Intrigued, the monks pass the goggles among themselves like a relic. When you slip them on, the world changes instantly. The blaze of snow becomes a soft gray expanse, contours clearer, shadows friendlier. It's like stepping from a stadium floodlight into a candlelit chapel. The pressure behind your eyes eases. You instinctively relax your shoulders. It's like looking through narrow mercy, Florian murmurs. The traveler gestures to their soot-darkened glass experiments and nods appreciatively. With more gestures, a few borrowed words, and some scratching on a wooden tablet, he explains that his people have long used bone, wood, and sometimes even whale baleen to craft these snow eyes. He shares that sometimes they line the inside with moss or fur so the cold doesn't bite the skin. The monks take notes as if he's reading from a new gospel. In the afternoon, you lead him through the monastery, letting him warm up by the big hearth. The brothers, shy but fascinated, ask him about the sea ice, midnight sun, and whether reindeer really do what travelers claim. One young novice quietly wonders aloud if the northern lights can burn your eyesight too. The guest grins and mimes squinting at the sky until everyone laughs. No, apparently not even the aurora is that rude. That evening, after the visitor has been guided to a guest bed, the monks gather in the workshop to copy his design. They carve slits in scrap wood, experimenting with width and angle. Too narrow, and they stumble into doorframes. Too wide, and the glare roars back in. It becomes a game: take 3 steps, adjust the slit, take 5 more, adjust again. You've never seen so many solemn men bumping into walls with such determination. Curiously, their own tinted glass doesn't feel redundant. Instead, the northern idea gives them a new lens, literally and figuratively. Why not combine the two? Brother Anselm suggests lining a wooden slit mask with their amber-tinted shards. The result looks slightly ridiculous, like an insect trying to become fashionable. But when he puts it on and walks into the courtyard, he gasps. The snow is dim, the shapes clear, and the sky holds gentle color instead of white assault. Historians still argue whether this kind of hybrid actually existed or whether later romantic storytellers inflated a few sketches into a whole proto-sunglasses prototype. Yet the concept itself is simple enough to feel plausible. Cultures meeting at the edge of the known world, swapping tricks for surviving too much sky. Over supper, the visitor shares a final detail that makes the abbot raise an eyebrow. In his homeland, he says, people sometimes decorate the edges of their goggles with carved patterns or bits of color, little flourishes of identity and pride. The abbot mulls this over like a man handed a hot coal. The monks can shield their eyes, yes, but adornment edges perilously close to vanity. The line between health and fashion, he realizes, is as thin as those bone slits. You can almost see the idea frighten him a little. These men have taken vows against excess. Yet here is a device that could, in theory, become more than just protection. It could become cool. That's several centuries too early for this monastery, so he politely but firmly declares that their versions will remain plain, undecorated, and shared. When the traveler leaves 2 days later, he walks down the mountain with a gift in return, a small piece of the monastery's amber glass bound in leather that he slips over his own bone goggles. He looks, in that moment, like a bridge between worlds, north and south, snow and stone, bone and glass. You watch him dwindle into the white distance until he disappears, both literally and historically. No one will record his name, but his influence lingers every time a monk puts on those carved slits and sighs in relief. That night, the wind hushes earlier than usual. The courtyard lies still, only starlight and the occasional patter of shedding snow from the roof. In the workshop, the bone-inspired prototypes rest next to polished glass, side by side like two quiet sentences in the same language. You sit there for a while alone, letting your eyes adjust to the dark without any aid at all, remembering the strange kindness of a stranger who arrived bearing a simple idea that seeing less can sometimes let you see more. Weeks pass, and the monastery hums with a rhythm that feels almost domestic. If invention once carried an air of transgression, now it has become as routine as prayer. The monks polish their glass lenses in the same calm repetition with which they once scrubbed floors. The mountain no longer torments them with light, it merely glows like an old friend who sometimes talks too loudly. You sit with Brother Florian beneath the cloister arcade, where icicles hang like silent bells. He's bent over a new problem, the lenses fog. Breath and body heat cloud them quicker than confession, our gossip. He wipes one with his sleeve, scowling. It's progress, he mutters, but inconvenient progress? You suggest drilling tiny holes for air, a modern instinct. He raises an eyebrow. I'll let the saints debate airflow. He says inside, the scriptorium is alive with shimmer. The illuminated manuscripts glow even under weak winter sun, each gold leaf throwing back hints of color into the dim recesses of the hall. Their workbenches, once battlefields of squinting and sighs, now host steady hands painting the Virgin's halo with clean precision. One brother whispers that the pages seem to hum with manageable light. It sounds absurd, but you feel it too. The same way soft morning lamps make reading feel intimate rather than punishing. Historians still argue whether the improved color saturation recorded in manuscripts from this monastery is evidence of the dark lens era or simply coincidence. The difference hardly matters when you see the results, pages that seem carved from dawn itself, never blinding, never dull. By midday, the brothers gather near their hearth to discuss new materials. They have glass, soot, and bone, but supplies dwindle fast. The nearest village lies days below, reachable only when paths thaw halfway in spring. Until then, they scavenge for translucent odds and ends. You watch one novice experimenting with flattened bottle bases from pilgrims left behind flasks. Greenish shards giving everything the color of underwater dreams. Another brother insists stained glass fragments from broken chapel windows hold divine potential. They've already seen sacred light, he says sincerely. Surely they understand it better than we do. The abbot barely keeps a straight face before gently reminding him that liturgical glass belongs to the Almighty, not to optical tinkering. Still, you notice no one stops him from pocketing a broken corner later that night. To test their materials, they adopt a system. Each morning, pairs of monks climb the snow ridge wearing different prototypes, one with thinly smoked quartz, another with soot-packed linen stretched over a wooden frame, a third daring combination of pig bladder and stained glass. They look ridiculous, like an army of hopeful beetles marching toward enlightenment. Yet by evening, their notes read like meticulous science. Version 4 prevents tearing. Version 6 distorts script but permits longer exposure. And in between these earnest trials, humor blooms. Brother Anselm, ever the jester, starts rating models as if writing town crier reviews. The double-lensed miracle perfect for gazing at sins too bright to name. Even the abbot cracks a smile behind his sleeve. You follow them outside one afternoon when the weather turns paradoxically cruel and beautiful. Wind, melted snow turning to glassy crust under midday sun. A blizzard 2 days ago left mirrored sheets across the fields. The brothers, armed with their latest ice shields, trek across the crunching plain with measured steps. As clouds part abruptly, sunlight streams through in massive columns, the kind you see in stories described as heavenly doors. The glare is merciless. But to your surprise, the monks don't flinch. Instead, they pause in clearus, each tilting their face toward the brightness like worshippers acknowledging an old adversary. Behind the tinted glass, their eyes stay calm. For the first time, the light doesn't win. Brother Cillian laughs, the sort of short, honest laugh only hardship buys. We should call ourselves the Order of the Shaded Vision, he declares. The name sticks for a few days, appearing jokingly in correspondence until the abbot bans it for sounding too glamorous. Monks, not musketeers, after all. Evening drifts down with lavender twilight, and you find the abbot recording his thoughts by candlelight. The flame's reflection wobbles across his dark lenses. Every discovery, he writes into the monastery log, seems to lead farther inward. We sought to behold less of the world, and in doing so, we see more of ourselves. You wonder if he realizes he's just coined the perfect marketing slogan for a product 700 years too early? At supper, they set the first rule of their new habit: glasses are not for pride. No polishing to mirror brightness, no ornamentation, no personal ownership. Items rotate weekly, avoiding attachment, a spiritual exercise disguised as eyewear policy. They sign it into their local statutes. Practical humility, Clause 11, each man deserves sight, none deserves comfort alone. You finish your meal in the gentle rumble of communal satisfaction. The scrape of spoons, the murmur of Latin grace. Then the abbot closes with one added phrase: may we never forget to thank the glare that taught us gentleness. Everyone nods, amused but sleepy. That night, wind again prowls the corridors, rattling shutters and tugging at candlelight. You sit awake, reflecting that for a place so focused on denial, these monks sure have developed a taste for subtle luxury, the luxury of seeing without suffering. Outside, the world disappears under fresh snow, each flake glinting like truth turned mercifully dim. Soon the room's warmth swallows you whole, and sound fades until only your heartbeat answers the wind in slow, steady rhythm. Morning light creeps gently through smoked glass, the same panels that nearly every monk now swears by. You blink in dim amber, a world painted the color of honey. Down the corridor, a bell clangs thrice, quick in content, summoning everyone for first prayers. These days, the brothers walk confidently in the courtyard regardless of glare. The snow's brilliance no longer blinds them, it greets them like an equal. The auxiliary benefit is unexpected serenity. No one hurries when the light can finally be faced. In the scriptorium, parchment rustles softly. Brother Anselm stirs ink thickened with soot, the very soot once used for coating lenses. He's attempting to refine it, adding ashes of hazelwood to darken the tone. Everything here wants to turn black, you tease. He grins. Then black we shall make holy. His fingers leave smudges on the edge of a page that depicts a shining angel wearing what curiously resembles a dark visor. He's halfway to inventing celestial protective gear. Across the room, the abbot studies an illuminated page through one of the early amber lenses. It magnifies slightly, hollowing every gold fleck. He touches his chin and murmurs, "Strange how the Lord made glass transparent twice, once in sand, again in patience." It's a pretty thought, and everyone lets it stand unchallenged. Faith finds no harm in small poetry. Later down in the kitchen, a novice coughs through clouds of candle soot, trying to perfect a more consistent coating on the lenses. His method is absurd, balancing a glass shard over candle flame using 2 spoons tied with string. Every so often, the spoon slips, the shard falls, the air fills with sparks and yelps. You offer assistance, he waves you off cheerfully, eyes streaming from the smoke. Pain means progress? He jokes, then sneezes black dust onto his robe. Historians still argue whether that kind of improvisation ever produced standardized results, or if the idea of early uniform production is just wishful thinking by modern romantics. But the monastery's surviving notes mention soot density in wonderfully cryptic terms: light sadness, medium penance, and deep revelation. You suspect those refer less to tint and more to mood. By midday, the monks venture outside again, testing a small stockpile of new lenses cut from translucent minerals found nearby. You trudge along with their group toward an outcrop where sunlight pours over the slope in thick sheets. No one flinches now. Brother Florian adjusts a strap across his hood and surveys the horizon. All these years, he muses, and we never thought to ask whether light could be negotiated with. His word, negotiated, sticks. It's not defiance but diplomacy with nature. The abbot, trailing behind, overhears. Every piece requires boundaries, he murmurs. Perhaps that too becomes doctrine in miniature. The mountain wind bores his next words, but you catch enough something about learning humility through invention rather than abstinence. It's philosophy disguised as small talk and melts instantly into the air. After lessons, the brothers gather by the refectory fire where experimentation drifts into gossip. They compare notes about which material offers the best clarity. Obsidian gets high marks for brooding depth, while soot linen ranks lowest. Too much fragrance of failure plus accidental eye smudging. One monk speculates about distilling darker oils into thin films. Another fancies finding transparent stone that refuses to be bright. You realize, almost with amusement, this is what a research symposium looks like in wool sandals. Evening brings new amusement. Brother Cillian, whose invention of contact lenses is centuries away but whose curiosity seems eager for it, presses tiny mica discs directly onto his closed eyelids. To warm them gently, he explains. Beneath the glassy film, he looks like a sleeping dragonfly. The others roar quietly with laughter. Just pray you don't blink too hard. Brother Anselm warns. They may be holy men, but slapstick is universal. That night, the abbot joins them for discussion, a rare, informal presence. The room's heat loosens formality. He asks quietly, suppose the sun returned its brightness tenfold tomorrow. Would you stand outside proudly in those contraptions? Half the brothers nod, half shrug. He smiles. Then we've succeeded too well. Comfort is never the final goal. Silence follows, respectful more than fearful. Still, you sense a shared thought, perhaps a little comfort doesn't damn anyone. After prayers, the monastery sinks into its habitual hush. Somewhere a door creaks, otherwise, only the faint sizzle of dying logs fills the dark. You wander to the window and peer out. The moon bathes the snow in dreamlike silver, not glaring now, but tender. Through the amber glass, it melts into soft sepia. One could fall asleep standing there, watching illusions unspool, snowfields like folded linen, peaks receding into velvet haze. You turn to find Brother Florian asleep at his desk, quill fallen from his hand. On the parchment before him, he's drafted a list: materials, methods, moral concerns. Beside that last heading, he's written only 2 words: ongoing experiment. That feels right. Invention here is not a conclusion but a prayer under construction. You pull his blanket around his shoulders and douse the candle. The smoke spirals upward, drawing black threads through the air. The same soot that guards their eyes by day. Everything circles back, an elegant loop of necessity and grace. Outside, the snow hushes every stray sound. Somewhere down the valley, unseen travelers carry lanterns that twinkle faintly, miniature suns moving through night. From this height, they look like nothing more than flickering stars trying to join the constellations. The monks, sleeping soundly behind thick stone, would probably approve the world learning, however slowly, how to see gently. When dawn unfurls again, it feels warmer somehow, though the snow outside proves otherwise. You rise to the rhythmic creak of buckets being carried down the corridor. The monastery has developed an odd harmony between chores and experiments. Prayers punctuated by the soft clink of glass. The monks have learned to move slower, almost deliberate, as if clarity requires deceleration. A new challenge preoccupies them, this weak color distortion. Their amber lenses soften blinding white, yes, but they also warp blues into gray and golds into strange pale roses. The brothers, who illuminate Bibles for a living, find this problematic. Imagine painting St. Mary's cloak the color of confusion. Brother Anselm says, rolling his eyes. The abbot suggests fasting as a solution. Nobody finds that helpful. That morning, you sit in their scriptorium watching sunlight slide over the walls like melted silver. The men at their desks lean into it without fear. You can almost sense something subtle. Trust, maybe, that didn't exist here months ago. Vision has become companionship rather than adversary. Brother Florian has drawn diagrams of transparent crystals, labeling angles like a geometer, though he's never seen one. He thinks light bends differently depending on how the surfaces are smoothed. He explains this to you with contagious excitement. We've learned to pray through sand. You see, the prayer is in the polishing. Historians still argue whether this counts as the earliest recorded description of refraction theory or just divine metaphor. Either way, it makes good conversation fodder centuries later. In the afternoons, when sunlight reflects from the far ridge, the monastery's inner courtyard transforms. Snowmelt forms rippling mirrors on the paving stones, throwing light in moving patterns across the cloister arches. The brothers joke that God is sending Morse code. You linger there, hypnotized by the slow dance of brightness turned merciful. Eventually, a courier arrives, a rare visitor bringing cheese, news, and rumors from the valley. He squints boldly at the monk's goggles before shaking his head. You look like penitents of darkness. He laughs. They hand him a pair to try. Within seconds, his laughter softens to quiet awe. I can see shapes without fire in my skull, he murmurs. By the time he leaves, he's bartered 2 goat hides for his own lenses. News, it seems, will travel faster this time. Inside, the brothers draft little notes for future visitors, simple sketches showing how to darken glass evenly by passing it through rising candle soot. One novice adds a line of commentary that makes everyone chuckle. Avoid long sermons near open flame. Still, the abbot worries. With each improvement comes outside attention. What if merchants turn invention into spectacle? He gathers the monks after dinner, his tone gentle but firm. Our purpose here is clarity, not commerce. Let none carry this skill outward for profit. They agree, though you can see quiet mischief glint in a few eyes. Even holy men like to be known for cleverness. As night falls, Brother Cillian tests another idea. He dips glass pieces into a mixture of boiled honey and ash, a sticky alchemy promising richer tint. He holds one to the firelight, nodding at the subtle golden dim it casts. When he passes it to you, the world looks softer, edges blurred but lovely. "I think we've made sunlight sleepier," he says. It's accurate. Looking through it feels like late afternoon no matter the hour. Later that evening, an accidental experiment charms everyone. A lens breaks into rough fragments, tiny shards spilling across the floor. One lands directly over a candle flame. Instead of shattering, it turns darker at once, temperature coaxing soot deeper into the surface. "It tans," Brother Florian exclaims. They mark the discovery carefully, heat deepens tint. You realize they've stumbled on a primitive concept of thermal coloring. But instead of patents and scientific journals, they recorded under things that behaved kindly when burned. The weeks grow longer. Snow thickens, now heavy enough that some roof tiles creak alarmingly. Days blur together in a rhythm of sight and stillness. Nothing truly dramatic happens, no fires, no miracles. But you sense momentum like a stream beneath ice. Knowledge accumulates even while the world sleeps. On Sundays, they rest the eyes entirely. Lenses are stored on hooks, glass wiped clean, soot jars sealed. Without their filters, the snow feels ferocious again. It's a small ritual reminder of vulnerability. After Mass, some monks simply sit in the hallway, blinking carefully, reacquainting themselves with full brightness. "Mercy," whispers one, shading his brow. "Yes," answers another, "but next week, mercy with amber edges." By moonrise, the temperature drops so abruptly that glass left too near the window cracks in thin size. One of those fractures looks oddly decorative, and soon half the community agrees it resembles angel wings. They record it as an omen of approval. Historians, naturally, still argue whether the so-called winged pane of Cetain, lumen, was real or a case of enthusiasm overtaking optics. You end the day sitting on a bench carved with initials several centuries old. The snow glows faintly, more gray than white under the clouded sky. For a long time, no sound breaks the quiet except someone's slow footsteps in the corridor. Even your heartbeat falls in rhythm with the monastery's sleepy pulse. Somewhere, melted wax drips, a reminder that even candles, the soldiers of light, eventually surrender to their shadows. Tomorrow there will be more experiments, more laughter, maybe more cracked glass. But for now, nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing hurts the eyes. The world simply glows in peaceable half-light, a miracle of its own making. By the time late winter edges toward reluctant spring, the monks' invention has quietly changed their entire pattern of life. You can feel it in their movements. Less tentative now, more fluent with the light, as though even their shadows have learned manners. But the shift that follows catches everyone by surprise. Beginning with the visit, no one expected a bishop wrapped in more self-importance than wool arrives at the frozen gate. You see him first, riding a gray mule that clearly questions its life choices. Two attendants follow, lugging parchment rolls and a cross so polished it burns briefly in the noon glare. He dismounts with a grunt that could be a prayer or complaint. "Brothers," he declares, "the diocese hears interesting whispers." That phrase alone could mean anything from heresy to unauthorized improvements to porridge recipes. The monks lead him inside, bowing out of habit. The temperature difference fogs his spectacles immediately. Irony neither lost nor commented on. He peers through steam at the roomful of men in amber-tinted glass. He says, "The rumors are true. You've taken the light unto yourselves?" Brother Florian, polite as always, explains that the lenses humble the sun, not claim its power. The bishop frowns, uncertain whether that's heresy or good marketing. "Nevertheless," he intones, "the church must be certain you haven't invited vanity through your windows." He means the literal ones, but his phrasing drips with layers. The inspection begins, each lens examined as if capable of sin. He lifts one against the glow of a candle and squints. "What's this residue?" he asks. "Candle soot, your grace," replies Brother Anselm cheerfully. "The same material that blackens our souls, only more cooperative." The bishop doesn't laugh. That earns Anselm a temporary assignment later cleaning chamber pots, though even the bishop can't tell if it's punishment or routine. Historians still argue whether this visit occurred in one long afternoon or over 2 days. Surviving letters mention a frozen mule of the episcopate, stuck in a snowdrift overnight, which might account for the bishop's bad mood. Either way, his official verdict recorded later calls the invention possibly permissible aid for monastic health, pending demonstration of humility. The phrase demonstration of humility translates loosely to, "Don't get too clever." To their credit, the brothers host him cordially. Supper features stewed beans, sour bread, and the classic dessert of keeping your thoughts to yourself. The bishop tries one of the soot-dark glasses before bed and promptly walks into a column, proving divine justice retains humor. The incident becomes the monastery's favorite story, retold for centuries with gentle embellishment. When the bishop departs, leaving his mule still skeptical, he promises to report favorably to the archdiocese, though he warns against turning miracles out of conveniences. The abbot nods dutifully. The bishop's cross catches sunlight as he rides down the path, flashing like a signal to worlds below. Perhaps a reminder that control of light is never purely technological, it is symbolic. After the inspection, atmosphere in the monastery lightens, literally and metaphorically. Permission granted means freedom to continue. They gather that afternoon in the workshop for cautious celebration. Bread thick with honey, stories swapped, laughter rolling like thaw water through hallways that have known only scraping silence. The abbot even raises a mug of weak all in salute. To sight, he toasts, Han to not losing it for pride. Everyone drinks anyway. The next morning, work resumes with renewed soft energy. You join Brother Florian outside where patches of bare earth show between drifts. His latest experiment involves embedding thin discs of glass into wooden frames bound by twine, the first true goggles if anyone asked. Historians later will call them crude, nearly unwearable, watching how sunlight bends through them, though you see genius disguised as improvisation. He holds one pair up to the horizon, where thawing snow releases a faint wand of mist. Through the amber lenses, the world shifts warmer, gentler. Do you see? He says quietly. Even the mountains look forgiving. You nod. These lenses aren't just shields anymore. They tint perception itself, a soft filter between harshness and gratitude. Inside, monks resume copying texts, the air filled with scratch of quills and faint murmurs. One manuscript you glimpse depicts saints shielding eyes beneath golden arcs. Visual theology, clearly inspired by daily life. The pages shimmer as though illuminated twice, once by pigment, once by story. That evening, Brother Cillian climbs to the bell tower to test distance viewing through the darker glass. He swears he can now track falcons gliding across the opposite ridge, creatures previously lost in glare. Maybe I'll find heaven just by squinting correctly, he jokes. Below, someone shouts that he sounds like a scholar of nonsense. Then I'm finally useful, he calls back, voice echoing between crags. As dusk drifts in, the sky ignites, a fire pink stretch fading to bruised purple. The glass over the workshop windows turns all those colors into gentle syrupy tones. Standing there, each monk looks haloed in bronze. You realize the invention has given them more than comfort. It's granted grace through atmosphere. Every scene now ends softened. That night the abbot writes briefly in the communal ledger, "Heaven's glare seems quieter this season." Perhaps invention, when humble, is another form of prayer. The ink gleams wetly for a moment before darkening, mirrored faintly in the surface of an abandoned lens beside the candle. When the bells finally ring for Compline, you follow the sound upward into a sky newly kind. The stars bloom slowly, indifferent yet measured. The glass in your pocket turns even starlight mellow. Standing there, you think somewhere below, the bishop reports his findings, unaware that in blessing cautious invention, he's allowed a revolution small enough to fit inside a prayer. A week passes in rare calm, the monastery turning into its own small universe of deliberate hands and half-spoken discoveries. The storm season ends shyly, nudged out by longer daylight and the slow drip of thaw from the eaves. You wake to the sound of water, liquid music after months of frozen hymns. Sunlight filters through failing patches of snow and strikes the scriptorium windows like warm applause. The brothers, tolerant veterans of too much brilliance, welcome the season with modest annoyance. Now, instead of blinding snow, they contend with wet glare from puddled courtyards and rivers of melt-running silver between stones. You watch them shuffle outside in their hoods and dark lenses, still looking faintly ridiculous, but moving with easy confidence. The scriptorium's mood is productive. On your walk past writing desks, you see tidy rows of new manuscripts glowing soft with the forgiving golden light their invention allows inside. The brothers can now work longer hours without headaches. That subtle revolution shows itself in margins, bolder pigments, steady lines, fewer ink blots born of tired eyes. Brother Florian has expanded his project beyond survival. His fascination has drifted toward beauty. He experiments with how differently tinted glasses alter perception of colors in the illuminated texts. One lens makes the scarlet robes of a painted saint appear like velvet wine, another cools them to serene magenta. Maybe God's palette changes depending on courage, he murmurs, creating theologically dubious but aesthetically valid footnotes. Historians still argue whether Florian's experimentation represents one of Europe's first recorded studies in color filtration or simply the side effect of long winters and creative boredom. Either fits. Life's soundtrack evolves too. The clink of glass has joined the tap of quills, the shuffle of sandals, and the occasional bleat from the goats out back. Even chores sound different. Suit preparation produces a soft hiss like snow melting on hot iron. Every act now holds this shared awareness of light, how to temper it, coax it, sometimes even joke about it. After lunch, which consists again of cheese, black bread, and the universal seasoning known as low expectations, Brother Anselm drags you into a surprise experiment. He has discovered that layering two different tints multiplies the effect. Holding his makeshift goggles, amber stacked over smoky quartz, you peer out and gape. The snow outside turns to dusk. I call it the eternal Lent, he says proudly while Florian deadpans. We already have that, brother. Even pious men appreciate sarcasm when delivered in candlelight. Later, you assist in repairing the monastery's small library window shattered by thawing ice. The abbot decides that instead of plain glass, the monks might install one of their tinted samples to filter virtue into the reading room. So the two of you fit in an amber sheet slick with layers of soot polish. When light hits it, the room glows like perpetual sunset. Pigeons outside appear as black silhouettes fluttering through honey-colored smoke. Everyone who enters the space lowers their voice instinctively. The abbot smiles. Temperance. By architecture, word of the window spreads quickly. Visitors who come for prayer spend equal time marveling at it. Some steal thin shards chipped from edges as relics. The abbot doesn't stop them, reasoning that good news tends to walk best uninvited. Down the valley, rumors soon circulate about the mountain brotherhood who tamed sunlight. Most exaggerations paint the monks as mystics, one even claiming their holy glass can cure headaches by glance alone. Toward evening, the monks gather outside to patch roofs. The snowmelt seeps into everything, wood groans, walls darken with moisture. Under that muted adversity, they work in perfect rhythm, passing boards and nails through pools of reflected cloud. You hear fragments of contented conversation drifting above hammer strikes. Someone wonders if sunlight itself might bless timber more efficiently after flowing through tinted panes. Another imagines building small greenhouses, light monasteries, they'd call them, to protect herbs from too much glare. The idea of growing plants in softened light delights them in theory and scandalizes the abbot slightly. That night, a soft rain replaces snow. It taps against the window with a patient rhythm, and the drops slither down the amber pane in streaks of gold. You can't tell where candlelight ends and storm begins. The world beyond feels painted in motion. A few monks stay awake copying texts by this liquid glow. The room seems underwater, time itself slowed. Brother Cillian glances up from his desk, eyes magnified behind his goggles. Do you think, he asks softly, we've changed heaven's opinion of us yet? You shrug. Perhaps heaven changed ours. He smiles, setting down his quill. Then we are even. Before complying, the abbot records another note in the communal ledger. Soothing brightness breeds diligence, but comfort tempts pride. Remember to dim light correctly, first dim the heart. You can almost hear the sigh of his quill at the pomp of his own phrasing. Still, wisdom hides in it. These monks have built a theology of moderation from mere frustration and soot. When the final bell tolls, a half-moon peeks through the melting clouds, throwing delicate luminance over wet roofs. The world shimmers, not dazzling, not dark, simply balanced. A slippered brother walks past humming an evening hymn that sounds suspiciously off-key but entirely content. You linger by the window until the amber glow fades with the candles, thinking that maybe moderation is its own sort of miracle. The kind the world almost never notices until it's quiet enough to sleep. A brisk wind rolls down from the higher ridges, sweeping the melting drifts into ribbons of glitter. You wake to the sound of goats protesting the brightness outside. Even their pupils look strained, narrow as hyphens. The monks, however, are unfazed. They shuffle into the courtyard like veterans of light, their faces calm, eyes half hidden under amber glass. The raw glare that once punished them now feels like an old teacher whose lessons they finally mastered. Today's rhythm breaks from their usual serenity because a caravan has appeared on the narrow lower path. A line of curious strangers trudging upward, bearing baskets that smell faintly of herbs, smoked fish, and commerce. Spring melts a little snow and apparently unearths traders. News ripples through the quarters, outsiders! The brothers joke about hiding their inventions before someone tries to trade a goat for them. Soon the travelers enter the courtyard, stamping frost from their boots. Their leader, a woman wrapped in an indigo shawl, introduces herself as a merchant from the valley. Behind her, a handful of apprentices carry simple wares, wool, candles, jars of early honey, and among them, gleaming from one crate, fragments of colored glass. The bright Venetian kind. It's almost too obvious what will happen next. Brother Florian's calm evaporates like breath on the mountainside. He stares at the fragments as if they're relics from paradise. Each shard catches the sun and throws kaleidoscopic flecks across the walls: blue, violet, sea green. The woman offers them easily, smiling. Traders below cannot sell them. Nobody wants windows so dark. The abbot tilts his head, amused. Then perhaps we can relieve you of your burden. Coins exchange hands. When the caravan departs, the monks swarm the new material like crows around shimmer. They study the fragments, surprised by how gracefully color can absorb cruelty from the light. Brother Cillian mutters, "We've been wearing humility, this is wearing joy." The phrase gets a smattering of scandalized coughs, but no real objection. By evening, they begin the next experiment, mixing the Venetian hues with their soot-darkened glass. The idea is epically impractical yet irresistible: tinted mosaic goggles. It starts as art therapy and ends somewhere near genius. When Brother Anselm wears a prototype, you almost don't recognize him. The lenses glow faint blue against his face, making him look like a sleepy beetle saint. Everything is suddenly cooler, calmer, he says softly. Historians still argue whether those colored fragments truly reached this remote monastery, or if later chroniclers stitched Venetian romance into local folklore. Yet physical remnants discovered centuries after. A few flecks of blue glass buried in collapsed wall mortar hint that truth indeed had a good time disguising itself as myth. The shift in tone spreads fast. Where once the brothers used suit and practicality, now beauty infiltrates purpose. During morning devotions, the sunlight pouring through their new window turns prayers into rainbow murmurs across stone. One monk jokes that angels are finally learning color theory. Of course, the abbot worries that aesthetic temptation might undo all they've achieved. That night, he preaches a brief reminder. Use the gift, but do not adore it. Listening, you picture how fragile the line between creation and idol always is. How easily a filter meant to see God better can become something worshipped on its own. But even as the abbot warns, you notice candlelight reflected in his own amber lenses. Everyone's still a little seduced by softness. A few weeks later, a group of wary farmers visits from the valley below. They've heard of the monk's clever method for surviving the high glare and ask, half shyly, if such protection can help in harvest season when wheat fields blaze. The brothers provide a handful of spare lenses tied crudely with twine. The farmers leave squinting less. And just like that, the secret invention begins its pilgrimage down the mountain, first work dill, then legend. In response, the abbot adds a new guideline to their rules, the market courtesy clause. They may share knowledge freely, provided no payment crosses the beam of light. The note reads, "Sight is grace, freely given, grace cannot be sold." A noble sentiment, although you suspect somebody forgot to include the part about goat cheese barter being technically payment. One rainy afternoon, you find yourself in the workshop as Brother Florian experiments yet again, now layering colored shards like stained glass pancakes. He hums absent-mindedly, face glowing under blue light. "Do you realize," he says, "we've made spring out of winter?" You look around, the floor's slate wet, the room gilded dimly, and you almost agree. The invention has turned the monastery into a house perpetually caught between seasons, where cold looks warm and darkness tastes golden. That evening, when the clouds finally split open, sunset flares through the valley like a spilled cauldron of bronze. The colored lenses transform it, blues deepen, reds mellow to rose, wind carries heat in tone rather than touch. It feels like the world is breathing slower. You lean on the rail beside Brother Anselm, who murmurs, perhaps sight itself needed confession. Such lines would earn him book deals in another century. Here they simply fade with the bells. As the last echoes die, you notice how the mountain's snow reflects faint streaks of color from the glass-filled windows above. The monastery has, quite accidentally, painted the landscape. Even the animals pause, the goats blinking against new tints scattered across their pasture. It's as if art has leaked into nature overnight. The abbey closes its shutters for bedtime. Inside, soft golden pools of candlelight float like islands. As you drift towards sleep, you realize that somewhere between vision and devotion, the monks have rewritten their existence in shades they can finally bear to look at. The mountain hums quietly outside, as though grateful that, at last, someone has learned to meet its glare without turning away. By early May, clouds crawl low across the slopes, pulling mist into the monastery courtyards like spilled milk. The landscape turns softer, green threads peeking through snow, and every rock begins to sigh with meltwater. You can hear it in the walls themselves, stone groaning lightly after months of compression, breathing again. The monks, now seasoned keepers of sunlight, face a new challenge that none expected: the return of visitors. Word of their soot-darkened lenses and honey-colored windows has trickled down every pass. Curiosity climbs fast in springtime. The first pilgrims arrive within days of the thaw, winding up the path like black dots on snow. They bring prayers, aching eyes, and, less appealing, expectations. Some call the brothers miracle workers, others simply the shaded order. You can see the mixture of pride and dread in every monk's drooped shoulders. The abbot marshals his monks into hospitality mode: extra bread baked, straw refreshed in the guest house, explanations quietly rehearsed. Remember humility, he warns, and that admiration is only flattery disguised as sin. Still, half the community can barely hide their smirks when they overhear pilgrims whispering about glasses of holy shadow. Brother Anselm mutters, "If only holiness paid better wages." He earns 3 raised eyebrows, but no rebuke. You wander between groups as newcomers peer through the tinted glass. Their delight is immediate and childlike. One woman gasps seeing snow without tears for the first time in years. Another bows to Brother Florian, calling him a healer. He blushes crimson, half terrified she might actually kneel. It is strange to watch reverence attach itself to something forged from soot and boredom. By sunset, the monastery feels different, livelier, yes, but also slightly uneasy. Prayer that night is slow, broken by suppressed curiosity about how famous they might become. The abbot senses it. After complying, he speaks softly to all assembled, "Beware bright mirrors. They do not show, they blind." His voice wavers not from anger but wary humor. Everyone chuckles, embarrassment diffused. The next morning dawns without harshness. Clouds muffle the sun's punch, and the air smells of thawed earth. It's perfect weather for demonstration. The monks line up their creations for visitors. Amber, blue, and green glass arranged like an unintentional art exhibit. You explain quietly to a farmer from below how candle smoke and patience created the difference between blindness and comfort. He listens as if you're retelling Genesis. Historians still argue whether this moment marks the true spread of sunglass-like devices in Europe. The leap from isolated experiment to shared knowledge. Surviving regional records note Popular Valles or Glacian View, strange terms pointing back to this mountain. Regardless of the terminology, the diffusion begins here, with you watching strangers blink through borrowed darkness in wonder. Inside, Brother Florian frets about attention. Genius dies in applause. He whispers dramatically. You nod while noticing he hasn't stopped polishing lenses all day, clearly thrilled by every gleam of praise. Contradiction never stopped monastic progress. At noon, the abbot leads a walk through the fields, both pilgrimage and subtle deterrence, since visitors unaccustomed to altitude quickly reconsider extended stays. From the ridge, you glance back. The monastery's amber windows look almost alive in mist, glowing outlines floating above snow patches. A child points and calls it the house that drinks sunlight. The abbot mutters, close enough. Later, you join Brother Cillian in distributing tinted scraps to the departing pilgrims. One per person, no hoarding. He reminds them in a tone equal parts sanctity and shopkeeper. The woman who first called Florian a healer thanks you tearfully. She presses a small bronze charm into your palm, a trade neither of you will admit happened. The abbot pretends not to see. Evening settles. The visiting crowd dwindles, leaving behind the sweet disorder of footsteps, half-read prayer sheets, and melted snow puddles shimmering like glass. The brothers stroll through the courtyard gathering forgotten items. One novice finds a pilgrim's wooden cross and places it beside a window where the light falls faint and even. The reflection doubles the cross image, one shadowed, one golden. See, he says softly, our invention already multiplies faith. The night meal feels like exhalation after hours of performance. They eat simply, laughing again about exaggerations overheard, that their glass could let one stare straight into angel's wings, that its soup mixing required relic dust. Brother Anselm proposes bottling the wind next. The abbot nearly chokes on his stew. Outside, rain begins, a persistent drizzle pattering through gutters. You follow its rhythm back to your small cell, where the window glows faint blue from leftover samples propped on the sill. Drips race each other down the pane. Through those colored streaks, moonlight turns tender. You write a note silently to yourself. Invention shapes the inventors. Comfort reshapes courage. Near midnight, the monastery sleeps. Yet light still plays quietly across its stones. Glances from lanterns of travelers far below, refracted through just enough glass to seem like stars. In the distance, you can almost hear their retelling begin, a story growing brighter with every repetition until, centuries later, no one quite remembers that all of it started with men trying simply not to go blind. A new sound wakes you the following morning. Not wind, not bells, but a rhythmic clatter like muffled thunder echoing from far below. You part the shutters to find an astonishing sight, a chain of mules glinting with brass harnesses winding up the trail. Sunlight flashes on the snow and on the polished load each animal carries, crates and sacks, and something glassy stacked in straw. The rumor of fame clearly outran the abbot's caution. Venice, it seems, has heard of the mountain light tamers. By noon, the procession reaches the gate. The leader, a merchant with waxed mustache and boots too shiny for this altitude, bows low but looks around eagerly. He carries with him letters of introduction, sealed in red wax and perfumed. The abbot examines the documents as if they might explode. They don't, but their implication does. Venice, famed for its glass, proposes learned exchange, meaning they want to see what the monks have built and likely how to turn it into profit. The brothers gather in the courtyard to receive the visitors. Brass ornaments jingle, silk rustles at odds with woolen simplicity. The contrast is absurd enough to amuse even the abbot. Brother Cillian whispers, they look like peacocks at a funeral. You pretend to cough to hide your laughter. Still, curiosity triumphs over suspicion. The merchant removes from his coat a pair of rounded glass circles set in a delicate wire frame, primitive spectacles designed for reading. The monks gasp. It's the first time they've seen magnification combined with transparency. The man explains through gestures and broken Latin that in Venice they grind lenses to aid aging eyes. The abbot's brow furrows, both impressed and faintly alarmed. If southern artisans can make glass reveal clarity instead of soften it, then light itself has no loyalty. Historians still argue whether this encounter ever took place or whether it represents an allegorical merging of two traditions in later folklore, the alpine dark lens experiment meeting Venetian craft. Yet merchant diaries discovered in murky archives mention hooded scholars who see daylight through smoke, suggesting some truth hides beneath the tale. The merchant proves charming, disarming suspicion with wine and gift bottles of polished sand shaped into small beads. Over dinner, he praises the alpine, mystic optics, and suggests partnership. The abbot listens politely, nods once, and replies, "We already have a partner, the sun. It pays in lessons, not coins." Conversation glides on, but both sides know this is refusal written in monastic script. After supper, the Venice men retire to guest quarters, grumbling cheerfully about lack of feather bedding. The monks gather in secret council under the roof beams. Voices rise, echo soft against stone. Some brothers whisper that collaboration could fund repairs by parchment, feed more mouths. Others argue that profit would corrupt intent. The abbot sits silent until all words burn out. Then he says, "When light becomes money, vision loses weight." The simplicity of it snuffs debate like candle flame. The next morning, the visitors request a demonstration. Brother Florian obliges, leading everyone into the glare outside with several sample lenses. Beneath that furious alpine sun, the Venetians blink and curse softly in dialect. When they put on the amber glass, sighs ripple through them. "Mio cielo, so gentle!" one man exclaims. "Gentle," Florian repeats quietly, rolling the word on his tongue like scripture. The merchant scribbles notes furiously. You sense record more than appreciation. The abbot watches, patient but wary. Afterward, the guests present a small mirror as a token of thanks. A polished silver plate framed by curving gilt vines. The monks stare at it as though a snake has learned manners. Reflections gleam back at them, distorted versions of their own hooded faces. For men devoted to humility, the mirror feels like temptation forged in metal. The abbot accepts it without touching the glass. "We prefer to remember what we look like from the inside," he says. That evening, bonfires flicker on the ridge while the guests make camp to prepare for descent. Before departing, the merchant corners Brother Florian in the courtyard. He offers him a modest pouch of coins, for ink or for insight. Florian hesitates, fingers twitching. The weight of gold sings faintly against the cloth. You watch him frown, breathe, and hand it back. "We already have enough blindness to go around," he says. Once the visitors leave, laughter bursts like controlled thunder inside the refectory. Monks reciting the merchant's florid compliments, the abbot mimicking his bow with comic exaggeration. The moment glows lighter than any lamp, yet beneath amusement lingers a quiet pride. Their humble suitwork impressed the worldliest craftsmen. They may have refused fortune, but influence travels regardless. Over following days, crates forgotten by the visitors become both burden and treasure. Inside are glass offcuts. Transparent, colorless, perfectly smooth. The monks handle them in awe. Compared to their own rough amber, these pieces shimmer as bright as breath. Brother Cillian studies one shard in the sun. It blinds him instantly. "Too pure," he complains. "Like friendship with angels? You can't stand it for long." The abbot orders the shards stacked away safely in the cellar, so they cannot teach arrogance. They do, however, keep a few pieces, embedding them above doorways where morning light slips through like liquid blessing. Soon, stepping into those beams becomes a habit. Brothers pause, cross themselves, squint through clarity they once could not endure. Reverence softens into gratitude. That night, with moonlight laying silver patterns across the refectory floor, you overhear Florian confiding to Anselm. "Perhaps our gift was an invention," he muses, "but the proof that even humility bends light." Anselm yawns. "And if Venice steals it, then let them squint their conscience clean." Florian answers, half amused, already drifting back to contented silence. Outside, the stars burn sharp and sheer, unfiltered. You tilt your head, trying to imagine them softened through amber glass. Yet here, in this cool clarity, you finally understand the paradox these monks have been living. Light isn't enemy or idol. It's just conversation. Some days it shouts, some it whispers like tonight, asking quietly to be seen without fear. The snowline retreats higher every week now, pulling the landscape back toward color. Where white once ruled absolutely, moss creeps through cracks and the scent of sap rides every gust. Spring at altitude feels fragile, like a dream that could melt if breathed on too hard. You join the monks outside in the first real warmth of the year, squinting across the thawed valley. Their eyes, tucked behind amber, blue, or soot gray glass, barely flinch. By this point, the brothers move with the quiet satisfaction of craftsmen who've conquered their nuisance. There's less frantic invention now, more refinement. They polish edges, adjust chords, debate measurements. The great experiment has matured into habit. Even the abbot seems lighter, his sermons shorter, more tolerant of jokes. But with thought comes another problem none of them anticipated: insomnia. Long days stretch into evenings that refuse to end, the sun lingering far too late. Without snow to exaggerate glare, the light is lower, softer, but endless, never retreating behind mountain peaks until near midnight. The brothers find themselves unusually wakeful, blinking against the pale twilight streaming through every narrow window. You overhear Brother Cillian mutter during work, "We shielded our eyes only to let the sun into our skulls." He fights off another yawn, then adds, "It's as if light has moved indoors." He's not wrong. The season of snow blindness has given way to its opposite, light that relaxes yet refuses to leave. At first, the monks handle it with humor. They invent nicknames for their sleeplessness. Holy Shimmer, the Long Amen. Yet soon, fatigue begins to hum beneath their cheer. Brother Florian stays awake copying manuscripts until dawn, humming tunes that sound vaguely heretical from lack of sleep. One morning, the abbot catches him staring blankly at a page, eyes open but mind absent. Rest is also a form of prayer? The old man insists, confiscating his quill. Historians still argue whether this so-called season of white nights prompted the monastery to record one of the earliest written notes about disrupted circadian rhythm. The surviving documents describe an unrest of mind caused by the daylight that refuses its own death. That sentiment sounds surprisingly modern. To adapt, the brothers experiment again, this time with darkness. They fashion crude shutters lined with thick wool to block stray glow, a paradoxical act for men who just mastered illumination. Brother Anselm comments dryly, "We've invented sunglasses for walls." His quip becomes a running joke, and soon those wool-lined panels proudly bear his nickname. If you listen closely on quiet nights, you can hear faint laughter behind every closed dormitory door as sleep finally returns. One evening, while you're helping to settle one of these makeshift blinds, Brother Florian confides that the insomnia might be a lesson. "Perhaps light simply wants to remind us it's everywhere," he says. "If we can't stop seeing, maybe we're meant to look inward instead." You smile. "That's philosophy talking, not fatigue." He shrugs. "Both keep me awake." As days lengthen further, the thaw transforms trails into muddy veins. Travelers begin migrating again, and with them comes gossip from valleys below, reports of merchants experimenting with tinted panes, of scholars in distant cities discussing monkish eye glass. The brothers treat the news with equal parts embarrassment and satisfaction. The abbot responds only, "May imitation outshine us." Quietly, around midsummer, they gather herbs from slopes now carpeted in green. The light spilling across the hillside barely shifts tone between morning and evening. Goats wander through half-shadow, bells chiming gently, and the air smells of thyme and warm rock. You notice how none of the brothers carry lenses anymore during these errands. Their eyes, long accustomed to controlled exposure, now seem less fragile. They glance around with unguarded ease. Inside, on one of those soft, sleepless nights, Brother Anselm inspects the old soot-coated glass that once seemed miraculous. Layers have flaked with age, dulled by months of handling. Yet the simplicity humbles everyone. "Think," he says, holding it up to candlelight. "All we needed was smoke to survive." The abbot nods. "And patience? It darkens everything beautifully." They laugh, but the truth lands gently between them. What began as necessity has turned into wisdom disguised as an optical accessory. When evening bells ring, they gather for prayers under that lingering gold light, kneeling silhouettes breathing in rhythm with days-long heartbeat. Later, lying on your straw mattress, you glance at the window. Despite the wool shutter drawn across it, a faint line of brightness sneaks below, the mountain's afterglow refusing extinction. You close your eyes and picture the monastery from outside, every slit of amber glass pulsing with low, warm life like eyes that forgot to blink. Sleep finds you gradually, melting across thoughts like light over snow, slow, patient, forgiving. The last sound you hear is the mountain itself, exhaling through pine and thaw. An old whisper turned new again, "Rest now, you've learned to see." Summer arrives without permission. It doesn't need to knock, only melt its way inside. Streams run wild down every slope, buzzing with insects too lazy to descend. The air smells bright and mineral, and the stone monastery, built for silence, suddenly hums with life. Bees slip through cracked shutters and drum along the window panes. The monks, who once spent entire days hiding from the glare, now linger outdoors like plants rediscovering leaves. You join them at dawn, where the courtyard glows the color of toast. No snow, no glare, just sunlight woven through mist. Brother Florian leans on a broom, half meditating on the ridiculous beauty of it all. "We've spent months fighting light," he says, smiling faintly. "And now I miss its noise." He gestures to the valley, sparkling like spilled wine. Silence is never pure, it always hums. The day begins quietly but fills with visitors again. This time not pilgrims but couriers from nearby abbeys bringing letters and questions, requests for guidance on crafting, tinted reliquary glass, pleas for recipes that turn sight merciful. The abbot reads them slowly, brow knitting softer with each new scroll. "We wanted no fame," he mutters, yet the world insists on curiosity. During the afternoon meal, the lodge fills with chatter about these letters. Brother Cillian imagines a day when every cleric owns holy goggles. Brother Anselm deadpans and matching purses. Even the abbot laughs, but afterward he falls into reflective quiet. You can see his gaze travel to the heavy wooden crucifix at the refectory's end. "We prayed for illumination," he remarks softly, "and got marketing instead." Historians still argue whether this subtle dread of popularity delayed further experimentation or encouraged it by inverse pride. The records become hazier in this season, Laziness disguised as mysticism, perhaps, but one detail endures. An anonymous monk, likely Florian, begins writing meditations on vision itself. The fragments survive centuries later in a collection titled De Lumine Matissimo, On the Gentle Light. In one entry he writes, "To see the world dimly is not to see less, only to let mercy edit the details." You recognize that tone anywhere. A man who believed perspective was a kindness. By midsummer, the monastery transforms alongside its inventor monks. The gardens restart, bees thrive, herbs sobered by filtered sun now overgrow their beds. You wander with Brother Florian as he trims mint stalks, brushing his knees. He studies his shadow. "We never think enough about shade," he says, casually profound. "It's the most democratic part of daylight, shared by all." After lunch, clouds gather and the sky turns the same gray-green hue as boiled sage. The wind smells metallic. Thunder cracks once, so near it seems to rattle prayer loose from the chapel walls. The storm climbs fast, rolling down bright sheets of rain. Everyone rushes to close shutters, layering their amber panes against water like armor. When lightning hits the ridge minutes later, the illumination behind the tinted glass turns surreal flashes softened into slow, harmless pulses. The storm inside the monastery becomes art, light, disciplined, tamed, beautiful. You lean against the doorway watching raindrops bead on glowing panes. Brother Anselm passes, drenched but unconcerned. Finally, he muses, "A brightness we can applaud." Then he sneezes loudly, ruining the moment. As evening settles, the scent of wet earth floods the hallways. Candles flicker under the amber shields, painting gold pools over damp stone. The abbot calls for quiet reflection, but no one needs prompting. The sound of dripping water serves as hymn enough. While outside thunder still mutters, the brothers sit by the great hearth, drying robes and retelling the same stories for the 100th time. The first suit experiment, the dizzy bishop, the traveling trader with bone goggles. Their laughter folds softly into the patter of rain. Later, at the abbot's request, Florian retrieves one of their earliest lenses from storage. It's scratched, brittle, patched along one edge with wax. Setting it before the fire, he watches color shift through fatigue and flame. No one speaks. Finally, he murmurs, "Strange. Is this invention ours, or are we simply passing on something the light forgot to finish?" The room digests the question in companionable silence. After prayers, while others retire, you linger in the nave. Water drips from arches into buckets, plinking gentle syncopations across the floor. Through the tinted glass above the altar, moonlight seeps, diffused into a slow silver sigh. It's hard to remember now how terrified these men once were of brightness. Standing there, you notice a faint reflection of yourself in the nearest pane, distorted, amber-hued, half erased by shadow. You seem part of the story rather than observer, another figure within the centuries that will hold this tale. When you finally step outside, rain has quieted. Mist curls above the courtyard, thick enough to resemble breath. The path glows faint under scattered clouds. You tilt your face upward. Through that thin sky glass, a lonely star twinkles. The same indifferent fire that bends through every lens, every eye, patient and ancient. For the first time in months, you look directly at it without flinching. The world doesn't hurt. It only glows where it matters. Autumn begins not as a chill, but as a thinning of noise. The bees quiet first, then the birds, then the restless wind that all summer rattled leaves against glass. Even the river below seems gentler, shrinking into silver lines that trickle instead of roar. You wake one morning to frost dusting the edges of the courtyard stones, glittering delicate as embroidery, and realize the year has turned again. Inside, the monks have recovered the rhythm of contemplation, less invention, more reflection. The glass experiments now hang neatly on a wall, labeled with dates and quick ink notes. First suit trial, bishop's visit, colored era. It looks almost like a museum curated by humility. Brother Cillian sweeps the floor beneath these relics as reverently as if dust itself were history's confetti. The abbot proposes a new task, making copies of their own observations. "A flight teaches patience," he says. "Perhaps the lesson is worth recording twice." The writers groan good-naturedly but comply, quills scratching through dawn while kettle steam twists under amber light. Outside, clouds tangle on the mountain's shoulders, and sometimes drop slow rains that smell of iron and old prayers. Historians still argue whether these compilations form the nucleus of later treatises on optics circulating centuries later. The entries blend theology, weather reports, and meticulous descriptions of brightness, tolerance tests. One paragraph reads, "Candle suit at 3 passes softens glare without dimming divinity." Another offers a proverb, "To see well is to confess the limits of gazing." While the practical paperwork hums forward, autumn deepens. Leaves descend like dispatched letters, some yellow, some red, some nearly translucent, nature's own stained glass. The monks notice, of course. Everything reminds them now of filtering light. Brother Florian collects a few leaves, presses them between parchment sheets, and laughs softly. "The season plagiarized us," he says. Their lives slow into gentle cycles, prayers, chores, occasional laughter. But peace, as ever, invites debate. One crisp morning, a messenger trudges up from the valley bringing scrolls penned by scholars who have heard rumors of the monastery's anti-glare devices. The tone of the letters alternates between admiration and envy. One even accuses the monks of playing with heavenly fire. The abbot reads it aloud at supper, then folds the parchment carefully and uses it to level a wobbly table leg. Balance restored? He remarks. Later, you accompany Brother Anselm to the terrace where the last of the summer herbs hang drying. He's polishing the amber window frames, whistling tunelessly. Do you ever wonder, he asks, if all faith work is just finding better shades for what blinds us? You reply that he should save lines like that for posterity. He shrugs. Posterity's too bright an audience. That evening, storm clouds drag themselves over the peaks again, but the rain never quite begins. Instead, mist fogs every passageway, swallowing even the torchlight's edge. The world contracts to the span of your own breath. The sensation is almost comforting, like walking inside contemplation itself. In the library, where drafts curl every page, Brother Florian copies notes about glass and shadow. He's calmer than you've ever seen him, older somehow, though only weeks have passed since spring. Light doesn't end, it retreats in manners. He muses, pausing mid-sentence. His ink trails into silence for several lines before he resumes with, "We have imitated mercy without fully deserving it." Eventually, frost overtakes rain. The first true cold stings the cloister garden, turning herbs crisp overnight. The air now bites so cleanly you could almost drink it. In that sharp brightness, the monks once again don their lenses. Not from glare, but nostalgia, a reminder of invention that softened hardship. You follow them outside as they rake frost from paths, the glass fogging slightly with every exhale. Each breath glints in sunlight, heavy enough to see. At midday, a gust lifts the last veil of mist, revealing mountains blazing bright with snow again. The sight strikes the brothers wordless. After months of tinted calm, the pure unfiltered white jolts them like déjà vu. Yet this time, instead of retreating, they stand and watch, a line of robed figures facing radiance without fear. The abbot steps forward and raises a hand to shade his brow, though he still wears his amber lenses. "Well," he says softly, or teacher returns, "and we have not forgotten the lesson." The others bow their heads, no one speaks of blindness now. They've learned how to meet peril with invention rather than panic. That night, in the refectory, wind rattles the shutters but no longer sneaks inside. The amber windows hold out the worst of the cold, casting warm ovals on rough tables. The view outside glows faintly, a reversed constellation of the monastery's own lights shimmering on the blank slopes. You sit near the hearth where an old lens, cracked nearly in half, leans against a jar. Firelight filters through it, warping the flames into twin suns trembling on the wall. The image mesmerizes you, it feels like memory trying to paint itself. Brother Cillian notices your gaze. "Funny," he says, "how even a broken thing can improve a view." Before bed, you walk once around the cloister. Everything smells faintly of pine smoke and thawed wax. The air glitters cold enough to hum in your lungs. High above, a few unfamiliar constellations hang, clearer than usual. You think of those farmers, those travelers, maybe even Venetian merchants somewhere down valley, each using their own small pieces of smoked glass, never knowing the prayers that tempered it. The monastery sleeps on through that brittle calm, glass glowing faint and steady in every window, as though the building itself is keeping watch for the next sunrise, ready once more to meet light halfway. Winter creeps back almost as silently as it left, padding over the slopes on paws of frost. One morning, when you push open the oaken door, you find the world remade again. Snow thick as scripture, sky an unbroken sheet of silver. Even the courtyard cross looks embalmed. The monks meet the sight with neither alarm nor complaint. They've lived this loop enough times to treat it like an old houseguest arriving with predictable demands. Inside, warmth holds steady. The amber glass panels leak soft gloss across the floors, mellowing the daylight to honey. Once, that same intensity would have blinded them, now it's tamed entirely. Brother Florian laughs as he polishes one pane with a scrap of linen. "Imagine hiding from something that only wanted a conversation," he says. Around midday, silence grows thick, too thick, like air paused on a held note. Then, shouts from the lookout tower. Visitors again, though this time quite unlike the pilgrims or merchants of previous seasons. The arrivals are foreign monks from the east, wrapped in wool robes of faded crimson, faces tanned and lined by high-altitude wind. They come carrying gifts, carved prayer wheels, parchment scrolls stamped with block-printed letters, and what appears to be sheets of thin translucent stone, mica shimmering like fish scales. The abbot greets them at the gate. Words pass uncertainly across languages, but hospitality bridges confusion. You learn later, through a patient translator's mix of Latin and gesture, that these travelers hail from monasteries beyond the Himalayan passes. Their communities face the same enemy, relentless glare off snowfields and high stone. They too have learned to dim light using slivers of polished crystal and green jade. Historians still argue whether this encounter truly happened or whether it's a later allegory of East meeting West. Either way, the parallels are uncanny. The Himalayan brothers describe heating rock layers until the surface darkens, essentially creating what modern minds might call smoked mineral filters. They demonstrate a small piece of jade, its color deep olive when held to the sun, turning daylight into the serenity of late afternoon. The alpine monks gape in delight. "You've been living our future?" Florian exclaims. One of the visitors smirks, not understanding, but pleased at the tone. Trade begins in earnest, not coins, not relics, but stories. They share methods: soot versus stone, sunlight versus smoke, both cultures engineering calm in their own idioms. That evening, the hall overflows with quiet amazement. Candles burn low as the two orders sit cross-legged on rush mats, passing objects back and forth. A slice of jade next to a sliver of amber glass gleams like sunrise beside sunset. Brother Anselm leans toward you, whispering, "Proof the world keeps solving the same problems in different languages." The abbot nods silently from his seat, eyes glittering behind half-smoked lenses. One traveler writes on parchment with black ink so thick it looks like tar. The characters curl upward in elegant shapes impossible to decipher. He gestures as if to say, "This too is vision." Florian mimics the pattern with Latin letters connecting eastbound curves with westbound flourishes. For a moment, the room itself feels like its own lens, two worlds overlapping until boundaries soften. The following morning glitters cruelly bright, but none of you hide. Together with the visitors, you step outside into a wind sharp as crystal. The sky is dangerous blue, the kind that bites eyes raw. The Eastern monks unfold small frames of wood lined with mica sheets and lift them to their faces. They look like smooth mirrors burning softly green. The Alpine brothers do the same with their amber versions. For a heartbeat, every man sees the world differently yet stands in identical peace. Light passes through jade, through glass, through patience itself. The snow becomes texture instead of punishment. The hum of wind vibrates low against the valley's ribs. For once, the mountain seems to recognize both accents of reverence. Later, inside, the abbot and the Eastern elder sit by the same fire, hands close to warmth but not touching. The translator dozes between them. Soft cracks of expanding wood punctuate the silence. Finally, the elder says something, short and melodic. The abbot blinks and repeats it awkwardly. The translator half wakes and murmurs. He said, "A light has two homes, one in the sky, one in the eye." The abbot smiles, "And we have both now." When the visitors depart a few days later, leaving small jade discs as gifts, the monastery feels quietly enlarged. Everyone senses it. Geography has stretched, humility too. Brother Cillian nails one jade slice inside the chapel doorframe, so grace knows no borders. The abbot doesn't scold him. Weeks glide by. The snow deepens. Inside, the brothers experiment gently with blending soot, darkened glass, and thin mica, marveling at how shades merge, amber meeting green to form the tender gray of dawn. They call it the twilight lens. Practical use remains limited, but the symbolism keeps them warm. One midnight, unable to sleep, you pass through the hall where these new lenses hang drying. Moonlight filters through them, painting shifting halos across the stones. The colors, gold, green, silver, mingle until impossible to separate, like languages blurred into one prayer. You realize this monastery has become what light itself always wanted to be, a meeting place rather than a commandment. Through every pain, through every culture, sight flows gentler now, shared evenly like breath. Outside, snowdrifts descend slow and silent, settling over roof and field alike. A dusting of sameness reminding everyone that darkness, too, connects continents. The new year dawns under a pale sun that flickers shyly through cloud. A hesitant guest after so much glory. The air feels brittle, wind curling through corridors like a half-remembered melody. Inside, the monks move slower, carrying warmth from room to room in covered buckets of coals, laughter thinning to whispers. You sense they've reached a rare peace, the innovation complete, curiosity tempered. But peace never lasts unexamined, especially when there's time for reflection. And in the long quiet months of winter, reflection arrives uninvited. It begins innocently with a letter, carried by a courier on snowshoes from the nearest valley town. The parchment smells faintly of oil and flour. It's addressed to the Brothers of the Shaded Light. The abbot frowns. Humility prefers anonymity, but he opens it nonetheless. The message praises their miracle work of the eyes, and ends with an announcement that makes the room collectively exhale. A young nobleman below is commissioning glassworkers to replicate the designs, turning protection into ornament. For festival, the letter notes proudly, Aber shades, finest polished, fit for ladies' promenades. A groan escapes several throats at once. Brother Anselm looks aghast. "We're never meant to start a fashion," he mutters. Florian, ever the calm one, closes his notebook softly. Every remedy becomes decoration eventually. Water ends up perfume. His tone carries no anger, just weary amusement. Historians still argue if this truly marks the birth of the sunglasses status, or whether later chroniclers embellished it, but it feels plausible, watching how quickly a need mutates into novelty. Already, the abbot decrees that no further copies of their methods be shared without a clearer intent. If pride shines too brightly, He says, let ignorance be our new veil. Still, curiosity nags. When a spring delegation arrives months later, craftsmen carrying the nobleman's gleaming versions of tinted glasses, the monks can't resist inspecting them. The craftsmanship is immaculate, smooth edges, light frames, tiny studs of silver. They protect the eyes but flaunt the face. Brother Cillian squints through a pear covered in filigree vines and bursts out laughing. At this rate, he jokes, we'll start confessing to our refinements. Even the abbot hides a smile behind his sleeve. Yet beneath humor, something unsettles everyone. The invention they birthed for survival now serves vanity below. The mountain monastery, once the world's refuge from too much light, watches humanity glamorize it again. The irony feels cosmic. One evening, while candles burn low, they debate quietly. Should knowledge always spread, uncontained, or must wisdom gate its distribution? The hall smells of beeswax and melted snow. Perhaps both are divine mistakes, Florian says. The Almighty creates stars knowing we'll one day trap their shine in jewelry. Silence follows, heavy but not cruel. They know he's right. A few days later, two of the visiting craftsmen, young, curious, awed by talk of holy optics, asked to see the workshop. Guiding them through those narrow rooms, you catch their faces glowing in wonder. They sketch quickly, reverent not toward faith but toward design. Before leaving, one murmurs, we'll remember your gentleness in every lens. Florian chuckles. Then at least distort us kindly. When they depart, the brothers stare at their footprints disappearing into snow. For hours afterward, no one speaks of visitors or vanity again. Instead, they pour their attention into chores, brewing, tending goats, repairing jars. The ordinary reclaims holiness faster than argument ever could. That afternoon, as sun breaks through clouds, the mountain mirrors itself in new fallen snow. The glare is familiar but softened. You stand beside the abbot near a window, tinted faintly green from the mica mixture. He gazes outward, then says something so quietly you almost miss it. Once, men feared to look. Then they feared to be seen. The lesson was never about light. It was always about courage. His words stay with you while wind hums faintly under the eaves. It's true. The journey wasn't about lenses or suit but surrender, about learning gentleness toward the world's brightness instead of fleeing it. Later that night, sitting near the faded lens that started everything, you study your reflection faintly caught within. It's incomplete, a partial outline drifting behind cracked glass. Somehow, the imperfection comforts you. Miracles rarely arrive polished. They arrive functional, ordinary, disguised as errands of survival. Brother Anselm plays low notes on a wooden flute by the hearth. The melody lacks rhythm but fits perfectly uneven, content to wobble like candlelight. One by one, the monks settle around, their amber windows glowing faint behind their silhouettes. Outside, stars emerge in silver clusters, the kind of sparkle that once hurt to witness. Now the monastery greets them bare-eyed. The tallest window reflects every light up above, scattering it in hundreds of subdued echoes. The same song, muted, patient. You realize the world will always recycle brightness into decoration. But here up on a quiet ridge, light is still treated as a guest welcome, unpredictable, forgiven. The bell rings her slow midnight chime, echo dissolving between cliffs like a sigh at the end of a long conversation. The monks exhale with it, half laughing at memories of smoky experiments. You join them in silence, knowing this peace may last only one season, but that's enough. Even faith learns slowly how to keep its eyes open. Winter recedes with a curve of gold along the horizon. When spring finally unclenches its fist, the world below the monastery bursts into bright green rumors. The monks smell grass before they see it. Meltwater races through every gully, 1,000 silver rivers repeating the lesson of flow. The air feels thinner and gentler now, like the mountain itself is exhaling after a long sermon. Word arrives with the first trading caravan of the season. War is marching through the valleys far to the south. Empires flexing again, small kingdoms rattling sabers. At this altitude, news sounds improbable. A story from a different planet. But the messenger's eyes say otherwise. He speaks of troops blinded by snow glare across alpine passes, of officers experimenting with darkened spectacles, shields of glass. The monks exchange glances so subtle they hardly need words. Even war finds usefulness in calm inventions. A week later, 2 soldiers appear, thin and wind-burned, caps askew. They come not to fight but to learn. They've heard rumors that an order of gentle sight can train men to endure mountain light. Their commander rides with Napoleon's army, they claim, and a lesson in glare could preserve a march. Brother Cillian mutters under his breath, the sun's been weaponized again. The abbot, to his credit, receives them as politely as saints would receive tax collectors. He offers water, a bench, and deliberate slowness. The soldiers fidget, they've been bred for urgency. After hours of polite negotiation through 3 languages and 1 translator with questionable accuracy, the monks agree to demonstrate their methods on one condition: no invention will be used for destruction. The soldiers swear sincerely, which everyone gently pretends to believe. Outside, the blonde glare rolls over the snowfields like silk fire. The monks hand the men spare amber lenses and encourage silence. The first soldier laughs, holds his shield of glass to his eyes, then stops mid-laugh. The laughter softens to awe. Everything looks calmer, he whispers. The second nods. Even the enemy. Historians still argue whether this moment influenced the later development of tinted military optics, or if it's just one of those half-true anecdotes the past clings to. But something genuine happens. The soldiers linger longer than duty demands. They stay for supper, help shovel snow, even join evening prayers. When they leave, the abbot sends them off with a blessing so dry it borders on parody. Fight gently? Once they vanish down the ridge, Brother Anselm sighs. Another legend seated. The abbot chuckles. Perhaps mercy travels best in disguise. The following days bring an odd quiet. Nobody speaks the word war. Yet it hums faintly around every corner. The brothers spend hours in the scriptorium writing copies of herbal recipes and repair notes, as if documentation itself could keep chaos away. You sense in their diligence a sudden urgency about preservation. Someone must remember that humanity once paused to study light not for power, but peace. One afternoon, Florian invites you outside to gather herbs. The valley beyond already blazes green. Sunlight catches his dark lenses and flings sparks across the snowmelt. They'll use it, he sighs. They always do. Fire, water, thought. Every gift becomes a tool. You remind him it could also remain a refuge. Refuge, he echoes. Perhaps the only unprofitable miracle. Together you kneel among stubborn alpine moss. Bees return, tiny gold comets punctuating the wind. The monastery looks smaller from this distance, yet every glint from its windows feels alive, a constellation trapped in stone. By May the soldier's tale reaches other ears. Caravans stop just to gawk at the saintly eyewear. The monks pretend indifference, but a few market peddlers depart with suspiciously detailed sketches. The abbot sighs every evening while watching the glint of torches winding away down the pass. Let them copy, he says, so long as they do not understand too quickly. And so imitation spreads. Blackened goggles appear among mountaineers, explorers, even artists trying to paint in glare. The brothers hear rumors that an engraver in Paris calls them occhiali pacifici, peaceful glasses. The name catches on. Somewhere in Europe, an entrepreneur files designs remarkably similar to the monks' early shapes. From necessity to novelty to profit, the loop closes neatly, as inevitability always does. Through it all, the monastery remains tranquil. Evenings find the abbey bathed in syrupy light leaking through amber windows like honey flowing uphill. The older monks drift between conversation and silence, both practiced to perfection. One night, while polishing his favorite soot-dimmed lens, the abbot muses, perhaps creation's sin is repeat performance. We remake what already exists until someone forgives it enough to matter. No one argues. It's difficult to argue with a man polishing darkness into clarity. That night, thunder trembles faintly across the far valley, the sound of battles far away. Here, only candle flames shiver. The monks eat bread dusted with flour like snow and talk of bees, not war. Before sleep, you climb to the tower. The sky stretches hazy blue-black, dotted with timid stars. Looking through a leftover lens from the early experiments, each star softens, haloed and warm. For a heartbeat, you believe you understand the monks' secret invention was never their goal. They simply sought a way to see beauty without being burned. Down below, the amber-lit windows resemble embers sown across the slope. From this height, the monastery looks almost like a campfire for the whole world, one that asks nothing but gentleness in return. Summer finds the monastery surprisingly alive. Crickets sing in cracks between flagstones, and the air, heavy with pine and wild mint, smells nothing like austerity. The monks' dark lenses perch habitually on their noses have turned gardening into mild obsession. Rows of carrots, chamomile, and unidentifiable experiments spread where snowdrifts once ruled. So much color? Brother Anselm remarks, vaguely scandalized. I preferred when the world matched my robe. It's in this lazy warmth that a new curiosity takes root. Not invention this time, but memory. The abbot, growing older and softer around the eyes, decides they must write a single chronicle. We've lived a decade of light lessons, he says during breakfast. Someone should remember them before they fade like snow on roofs. Florian volunteers first. He sits near the garden wall, quill-tapping the wooden board as bees muscle past his ears. How do you explain an accident that became a philosophy? He asks. Simply, replies Anselm, beautifully, as all historians do. Their laughter ripples out with the fragrance of thyme. The chronicle progresses slowly, no urgency, each entry polished like a pane of soot glass. They give it the modest title De Visu Humili, on humble sight. You glimpse parts as it develops parables disguised as lab notes, diagrams of candle, smoke glass beside reflections on patience. One line reads, "The Lord hides mercy in the brightness just to see who bothers softening it." Even the abbot admits the phrasing glows. Historians still argue whether this manuscript survived. Some claim a copy resurfaced centuries later in a Venetian archive under another name. Others believe it lies still entombed in the mountain cellar, sealed away with the last shards of amber glass. Whatever the truth, its existence hums through every layer of this story like light between clouds. Mid-season brings visitors again, though now mostly scholars and artists drawn by rumor. They arrive eager to stare through divine filters, sketching monasteries in sepia tones, taking notes on how reflections blur into peace. The monks host them with their signature balance of courtesy and bewilderment. Anselm jokes that one day tourists will arrive just to nap while listening to lectures about snow. He isn't completely wrong. Centuries later, they will. One warm afternoon, you and Florian lead two painters to a ridge path. They keep stopping to admire how sunlight turns the glacier turquoise through thin air. "Your eyes are fortunate," one says wistfully. "Ours burn just painting this brilliance." Florian hands him an old lens. "Then paint through patience," he advises. The man peers through it and gasps. "The world looks asleep." "Exactly," says Florian with a grin. "Now stay quiet so it doesn't wake." The painters stay 3 days, sketching feverishly, then vanish downhill, promising to immortalize the abbey. Later you learn they've dubbed it La Casa del Occhio Tranquillo, the House of the Gentle Eye. The name sticks far beyond the valley, despite the abbot rolling his eyes every time it's mentioned. Evenings stretch long and amber. The monks sit outside the refectory, sandals off, toes buried in cool grass as they sip weak ale. They talk not of theology or crafts but of little things, how bees dislike reverberating bells, how light slipping through clouds resembles mercy rehearsing. Each remark folds into the next like notes blending on organ pipes. The tone is so ordinary that it edges toward holiness. One night, a letter arrives addressed to the inventors of tranquil vision. It's from a physician in Zurich who claims their lenses help calm patients suffering what he calls orb and dizziness. The monks pass the sheet around and sigh almost fondly. From penance to therapy, Ansel mutters, "We've reinvented rest." That same evening, rain begins. A soft, even drizzle that sounds like applause too tired to argue. You stand under the cloister eaves watching drops blur against the amber panes. The monks light candles, and the reflections double, then triple. There's a moment where you can't tell which glow is inside and which outside, the whole world becoming nested warmth. The abbot joins you quietly. "You feel that?" he asks, gesturing to the rain. "That's time passing without urgency. The rarest invention of all." He chuckles, shaking his head. "One never set out to soften the sun, only ourselves." Later, after compline, you pass the workroom. On the table, the nearly finished manuscript rests open under a flickering oil lamp. A pressed leaf lies between pages, its veins glimmering like faint constellations. Outside, thunder sighs far away. Inside, ink smells faintly of soot and wine. You run your fingers lightly over a single sentence that Florian has written at the bottom. "The heart, like the eye, grows blind not from darkness but from glare." You whisper it silently, knowing the words will outlive paper somehow, echoing whenever someone lowers tinted glass between hurt and horizon. The candles burn almost out. In their low glow the wall glistens with a cascade of faint reflections, each one softer than the last, until even the darkness begins to look gentle. The year turns quietly again. By the autumn of this new cycle, the monastery's garden droops brilliantly with overripe color, pumpkins glowing like captured sunset, herbs drying in fragrant knots. The brothers move through golden air full of soft insects and drifting fumes of smoke from the first fires lit for warmth. No one speaks of experiments anymore, they simply live them. Every window, every gleam, every candle reflects not invention but a long habit of gentleness. Yet progress never sleeps entirely. A letter arrives one gray morning carried by a tattered courier from the southern foothills. It's addressed simply, to the brothers known for merciful glass. The handwriting tilts stylishly. Inside, folded neat as origami, lies a request, not for theology, but for technology. A Parisian optician wants permission to study the monastery's lenses, in partnership with modern science. He promises credit, gratitude, perhaps immortality. The abbot snorts softly. Immortality already visits daily. We just call it routine. The letter goes unanswered, tucked into the growing stack of ignored invitations in a drawer labeled Temptations of Improvement. Still, curiosity tugs quietly at several hearts. Brother Cillian, restless in intellect, wonders aloud how their smoked ideas might behave if refined by urban tools. "Imagine glass so perfect it shades itself," he says dreamily. Florian, sharpening quills, smiles. "And then what would we complain about? A monastery without problems would implode." A few chuckles roll across the hall like warm stones. Historians still argue whether any monk truly broke the vow of secrecy. Some later accounts suggest Cillian kept correspondence with that Parisian artisan for years. If so, his letters are lost, absorbed, like light, into legend. What can be said for sure is that within decades, polished tinted lenses reappear across Europe in opera boxes, on seaside promenades, peering from the faces of admirers pretending to squint romantically at sunsets they can finally endure. Life on the mountain, however, remains stubbornly the same. Seasons rotate like pages turned by gloved fingers. The abbot grows frailer, his beard turning from snow white to parchment yellow, but his humor remains sharp. "We've lived to see usefulness become luxury," he says one evening, gazing through the amber chapel window. It's proof that comfort breeds art and art breeds more discomfort. He smiles, adding, "The divine joke writes itself." As his strength wanes, daily responsibilities shift quietly to Florian. You've watched him transform from curious experimenter into reluctant shepherd. He handles it with simple grace, though the weight shows sometimes in his slower speech. Leadership. He murmurs once while mending a frame, is just knowing when to say enough brightness for today. That autumn, a traveling painter visits for 3 days to capture the monastery, before progress ruins its silence. He sets up his easel by the bell tower, painting for hours while the monks hum psalms in the cloister. The result, left as a gift, stuns everyone. He depicts the abbey not under sun or snow, but twilight, the exact color produced through their darkened glass. Every window in the painting glows amber as if powered by kindness. When the abbot sees it, he nods slowly. He understood. He whispers, "Better than we explained." The days shorten. Fires hiss louder at supper, shadows lean longer. The brothers reread their manuscript draft in evening sessions, adding small marginalia, jokes, weather notes, stray memories. Under the title De Visu Humili, someone scribbles, "Finished, though sight never is." The abbot seals it with wax from an old candle, pressing his ring gently, almost lovingly. A week later, they bury him in the frost-rimmed cemetery below the chapel. The funeral is quiet, only the crunch of snow and murmured Latin. Instead of flowers, each monk places a small shard of tinted glass on the mound. 40 pieces of softened sun catching the pale day. Florian's voice, rough from age, pronounces the closing prayer, "May all light treat you kindly now." That night, silence settles thicker than it has in years. No one talks of new ideas. The absence of the abbot's dry humor feels like the dimming of a lamp. But in that dimness, something in their invention feels suddenly holy, not a trick of survival, but a lesson consummated. Months slip by. Birds vanish again to lower woods. Snow returns. Through amber panes, the world repeats its glittering sermon. Florian spends evenings cataloging the remaining glass samples in neat rows. Or legacy, he murmurs, is proof that gentleness can be engineered. Once, you find him asleep in the workshop, head resting on pages of the manuscript. Candlelight trembles over his weathered face, and the lenses on the table before him, casting layered halos against the wall. Each gleam overlaps, the color of honey, moss, and soot, new shades of endurance. A line from their chronicle drifts through your mind. To guard one's vision is not to hide from the world, but to see it slowly. As snow whispers against the door, the monastery sighs with the ease of a creature that has endured long enough to stop apologizing for comfort. The world outside, unaware, continues perfecting glass for luxury and war, never knowing the true invention here was patience. Now the mountain's rhythm seems to pulse slower, like a heart-conserving strength. The abbey bell tolls softer in the thinning air. You can almost feel the centuries folding gently inwards, each one bowing to the next. Brother Florian, gray-bearded and deliberate in motion, walks as if time itself needs a steadying hand. He calls the brothers less often now, preferring silence and small repairs to grand sermons. The glass collection, once a workshop of tinkering chaos, resembles a shrine. Each lens sits under a thin layer of dust that glows gold when caught by candlelight. You wander through one morning, hearing the brittle hiss of cold wind pressing against the shutters. The air smells like wax and ink, not much different from the first winter years ago. Except now, the dust carries memory. A young novice approaches Florian while you're there, holding a cracked pane. "Should we throw this away?" he asks. Florian studies the piece, turning it slowly. "No," he replies. It still remembers brightness. The novice blinks, uncertain if that's metaphor or rule. Around here, the two mean the same thing. The quiet gives Florian room to think too much. In the evening, he reads aloud from their own manuscript, stopping to edit sentences mid-breath. One he changes into something crisper. Invention is mercy with a practical budget. He looks at you, laughing softly. The abbot would groan. Historians still argue whether these revisions explain why later copies of De Visu Humili differ slightly between monasteries. Maybe Florian himself sent fragments down the mountain with traders. It would fit his sly generosity, teaching without ownership, letting wisdom travel like pollen. Outside, the snowpack glows under constant midwinter light. The sky clears to impossible blue. You find Brother Anselm leaning against the wall, lenses perched haphazardly on his nose, squinting at horizon shimmer. "Strange," he says. "Oh, you can love the thing that hurt you. We used to curse this glare." You ask if he misses sky unfiltered. "Sometimes," he admits, "but too much truth at once makes me sneeze." Inside, life feels both smaller and richer. Meals are quieter. Laughter arrives easily but fades fast. Every task, mending robes, copying hymns, cleaning soot from glass edges, occurs with the intimacy of ritual. Even dusting a window carries intent, a gesture confessing affection to light itself. One evening, word reaches the monastery of a new truth circulating across Europe: the study of light refraction, the birth of physics. Names like Newton and Hooke drift in with passing travelers. They describe prisms splitting white radiance into colors, diagrams of wave and particle. The younger monks marvel. Florian smiles. So the scholars have begun drawing what we already lived, he says. Good for them. May they remember to squint. The mood grows philosophical. After supper, they discuss whether color is property or perception. Brother Cillian insists blue exists whether anyone sees it. Anselm counters that color is rumor between eye and heart. Arguments dissolve into chuckles. Whatever its cause, Florian concludes, the purpose of light is to reveal gentleness. Everyone murmurs assent, the only doctrine truly unanimous. Winter deepens abruptly. Icy gales moan through roof beams, but the amber glass turns blizzards into golden veils. Overnights of thin sleep, you realize how the monastery's architecture has aged into light's personality. Every reflection calm, every shadow kind. Perhaps the building learned empathy by proximity. Weeks pass like whispered paragraphs. Then, one dawn, the bell fails to ring. You find Florian still in bed, eyes closed, fingers ink-stained to the end. He seems mid-thought, smiling faintly as if the ceiling offered final clarity. The silence that follows feels endless, but not cruel. The monks hold vigil all night. They place his quill atop the manuscript, now closed forever. In the morning, soft snow sweeps in through the half-open door, pooling around his cot like folded white parchment. Someone remarks that even the storm pays last respects. After burial, the brothers clean the workshop, their chapel of soot and science, without hurry. They hang one small lens above the door, Florian's first piece, uneven and darkened nearly black. To remind us of unfinished work, says Anselm. And finished teaching, adds Cillian. Outside, light spreads over the valley like breath mist, diffused by thin clouds. You watch it ache across the peaks, imagine how it would look through all those layers. The smoke, the amber, the jade. It's too beautiful for direct stare, but you can guess its softness. That night, as the mountain wind whistles, you open a window just long enough to let starlight in. The rays fall across the manuscript's cover, faintly gilding the embossed title. For an instant, the worn letters shimmer as though eager to speak once more. You whisper Florian's favorite line back to them. To soften what blinds is holy. Then you close the book gently, knowing its light will travel without glass now. Years pass quietly, blurring one season into the next until time itself feels like snow, soft, uncountable, everywhere. The abbey endures, half museum, half heartbeat. You stay on, aging with the walls, a witness more than a character now. In the lulls between chores, you sometimes hear the ghosts of old voices in the workshop, Florian teasing Anselm. The abbot's dry quips, hammers tapping glass like distant bells. They're not haunting so much as habitual echoes, the mountain's polite way of remembering. The present generation of monks knows the legend, but not the labor. They were born into filtered light, into the normalcy of amber warmth. Their curiosity about glare resembles mythology. Did it really hurt that much? One novice asks. You smile, enough to keep people humble. He nods as if accepting a moral fable rather than lived truth. Historians later will claim this was the abbey's philosophical zenith. The brothers shifted from invention to interpretation, writing long commentaries on De Visu Humili. Their discussions grew labyrinthine, whether light itself was a divine metaphor or merely its own sermon. The monastery changed from laboratory to library, from smoke to scroll. Yet the spirit of experiment endured, just subtler now, moving through words rather than minerals. Among the newer texts, one stands out: Meditation on Slow Radiance, written collectively and left unsigned. It proposes that seeing gently parallels forgiving. One passage reads, "The eyes that soften will someday teach the heart to imitate them." Another warns, "When comfort dulls gratitude, draw back the veil, let brightness sting until reverence returns." The monks treat it not as instruction but as lullaby. Read aloud before sleep when storms beat the shutters and even faith feels loud. Outside, the world tumbles forward again. You hear whispers of revolutions, telescopes, and far-off discoveries. Galileo's descendants drawing galaxies through better glass. Humanity keeps bending light in grander ways, but here, every discovery sounds like confirmation of what happened already, in silence optics as a path to empathy. One summer, a scholar climbs to visit, armed with notebooks and modern spectacles rimmed in brass. He's earnest, fascinated, slightly insufferable. During supper, he declares your forebears, proto-scientists, unwitting fathers of progressive optics. The table hums with restrained politeness. When he asks which brother first understood refraction, Anselm's successor smiles faintly. All of them, and none of them. We were merely too uncomfortable not to learn. The scholar stays 3 days, cataloging relics with equal parts reverence and irritation. The soot-dark glass frustrates his sense of purity. Imagine what clarity they might have achieved with proper instruments, he exclaims. But then, replies a quiet monk stirring his soup, imagine what charity they might have lost. The conversation drifts off, content with neither victory nor defeat. When the scholar departs, leaving generous donations and slightly offended pride, peace returns. The brothers gather in the courtyard at dusk to watch fog creep from the valley. The mist absorbs sunlight until the air turns liquid gold. No one blinks behind their lens. just a collective stillness as the visible world dissolves kindly into colorless calm. That night, you find yourself alone in the scriptorium, leafing through Florian's old notes. Between diagrams and smudged Latin are fragile sketches of faces, half smiling, half squinting. Beneath one he'd written, "Good lens teaches compassion, not clarity." The simplicity stops you cold. You trace the faded ink like tracing a constellation only you can see. You step to the window. Outside, the last snow of the year glows beneath a crescent moon. Through the amber pane, it looks like silk brushed with fire. Each flake carries a halo, every shadow a softness earned through centuries. You imagine those first monks standing exactly here, blinking through pain, stubbornly squinting their way towards serenity. In the lower chapel, the novices sing. The chant echoes up the stairwells, a language older than intellect, newer than sorrow. Their voices mix with wind until both sound like breathing. You realize the invention's legacy hasn't vanished or dulled, it's simply changed medium. The soothing of light now lives in music, in patience, in the texture of voices refusing haste. Before returning to bed, you tilt one of the remaining lenses against a candle. The flame elongates, boundless yet subdued, its edge trembling but never breaking. In that trembling, you sense the heartbeat of this place, its gentle defiance against every age that equates brightness with brilliance. Outside, stars flicker indifferently, humanity below them races faster each year. Yet here, amid soot and stone and whispered hymns, clarity still chooses grace over precision. The monks long ago proved that enlightenment isn't about seeing more. It's about learning when to close your eyes. The candle gutters out. You listen a moment to the mountain breathing, then to your own steady pulse joining it, both rhythms softened by distance. Through the dark glass between you and the night, the world still gleams, but gently, always gently. Dawn returns without hurry. The mountains blush faintly, reluctant to wake, and the abbey exhales warmth into thin morning air. You sit near the eastern window, Florian's window, where light once stabbed mercilessly across the floor. Now it trails softly through the amber panes, an old soldier's sword sheathed by kindness. The brothers around you move like paragraphs revisited, repeating chores that long outlived their authors. You wonder if every monastery becomes eventually a living book. Outside, spring stretches across the slope like spilled parchment. Mosses gleam, distant bells from the valley climb faintly through mist. The monks no longer flinch from those bright sounds. They simply blend with them. That, you realize, is your legacy here, the art of blending. After breakfast, Brother Cillian's successor, cheerful, round-cheeked, more inclined to humor than meditation, shows you the preserved workshop. Dust lies thick, but careful. The soot-blackened chimney still scars the ceiling underneath. The famous table stands polished from generations of reverent cleaning. Every relic rests where it was left, bowls of resin flakes, bits of mica, a single cracked lens gleaming under the slanted light, half shadowed, half lit. This one, he says, tapping the cracked glass, we never restore. It reminds us that vision's never perfect. He grins, quoting the old chronicle verbatim, to see gently is to accept the blur. The phrase feels like farewell spoken by memory itself. By midday, the clouds part, revealing a valley shimmering with rivers newly loosed from ice. You climb the bell tower to watch sunlight ripple along rooftops. Even with your eyes bare, you don't squint. Centuries of soot and wisdom hang invisibly between you and the glare. Somewhere below, goats bleat absently, descendants surely of those same stubborn creatures that once watched men smear soot on quartz and call it revelation. Historians still argue whether any of these events, bishop visits, jade exchanges, armies borrowing mercy, ever truly happened. But standing here, you understand that truth and accuracy parted ways long ago. This story isn't about verification, it's about illumination, how people, cornered by beauty too fierce for their frail senses, invented gentleness just to survive it. Evening approaches in slow gold. Shadows stretch lazily over the stone yard where grass grows thick now, unafraid of frost. The monks lay tools aside, voices weaving with wind into harmonies half sung, half remembered. The bell rings, not an announcement this time, only greeting. One thin tone rolling outward until it fades beneath the whispering pines. You wander back inside as the sun tilts west. In the chapel, candles cradle their small flames. Across the altar hangs a new piece of stained glass, a pale amber center ringed with dull green and traces of smoke gray. When dusk filters through it, the world beyond dissolves into the color of forgiveness. Beneath that light, even the oldest stone looks almost tender. You kneel there longer than intended, watching dust drift like snow in golden currents. It feels less like prayer than listening, a patient attention to all the quiet labor light has done over the ages. These monks never conquered brightness, they befriended it, taught it to whisper. Their victory is invisible, yet it coats every wall, every thought, every breath taken without flinching. Night gathers on cue, cool and steady. The brothers file to their cells, sandals sighing over worn stone. You stay behind, one last look through Florian's window. Stars bloom sharp above the valley, and for a moment you fear their purity. until you notice how the amber glass hums against it, softening even starlight into something the eye can bear. You lean forward, fingertips brushing the pane that began an accidental salvation. Through it, the world shimmers in muted galaxies, gold, silver, and smoke. No pain, no glare, just peace built layer by layer from soot and need. You whisper, almost laughing, "We made sunlight polite." The air answers with nothing but warmth. Then slowly, you turn away. Behind you, the last candle breathes out, leaving the chapel bathed in the faintest afterglow, half light, half memory, and the mountain settles to sleep beneath its patient crown of snow. The bells no longer ring, their echoes do. You stand within that echo, listening as the valley exhales its long breath. Every sound slides into distance, the crunch of boots, the hush of pines, the invisible snow turning everything level again. The light, too, loosens, pulling itself thin until it drapes over stone like silk left in a window. You sit there, eyes half closed, breathing in the cool air that carries hints of beeswax and mountain mint. No feeling rushes, it arrives the way dawn does, quietly deciding for you that the day is done. Each inhale tastes faintly metallic, like candle smoke or memory, each exhale leaving you lighter by a thought. If you listen carefully, you can still hear them, the early brothers laughing over cracked glass, the scrape of quills, the faint clatter of jars. They exist somewhere between dream and snow melt now, still tinkering, still turning brightness into something tender. And outside, the peaks flare with moonlight and settle into softness again, exactly as they did centuries ago. Let their calm bleed into yours. Let the mountain rearrange the weight of your breathing. In this dim, honey-colored quiet, there's nowhere you have to go, no glare waiting at the edge of thought. Only rest calm, folded like a blanket over the world, warm enough to see by. Close your eyes. The light will wait.